It is 5:30 and it is time for me to call the regular meeting of Greenwood County Council for Tuesday, my microphone, Tuesday, July the 21st, 2020. In accordance with the Freedom of Information Act, the date, the time, the location, and the agenda of this meeting has been posted on the front entrance of the Greenwood County Courthouse. Also on the front entrance of the Greenwood County Library, a copy of that agenda has been made available to the media and also has been posted on the county's website. Let me say that I welcome each of you to our meeting. We appreciate you being here. Prior to this meeting, we voted to go into executive session and discuss our executive session matters at a 4 o'clock meeting as opposed to maybe after the meeting. And I need a motion from council that we adjourn our executive session.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Moats and seconded by Ms. Childs that we come out of executive session. All in favor? Aye. Mr. Templeton votes with us. So we're now out of executive session and we have some action to take as a result of executive session. So I'm going to ask council to provide me with a motion regarding the action as a result of the executive session.
Chairman, I'd like to make a motion. We authorize county manager to create an economic development department within the county government and to staff it as is appropriate for economic development needs.
Do I have a second to that motion?
Second.
1, 2, 3. Ms. Childs and Ms. Spencer and Mr. Moats seconded that. You can choose whichever one. Would you like to discuss that motion? Madam Attorney, would you explain to the people exactly what that means?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. What this will do will give the county manager the authority to create an economic development group, department, either within administration or within the county, and also to hire the appropriate staff for that department.
And just to add to that, the county, since we voted to withdraw from the Greenwood Partnership Alliance, we have been meeting with various stakeholders, other counties, state officials, upstate alliance officials. We met with industry people. We met with commissioners of public works, Metro Sewer Commission, City of Greenwood, talking about where we need to go as far as economic development and how we structure the future in economic development. The only reason I say that is this authorization that we have done tonight gives the county manager the authority to hire staff on an interim basis while we continue to still meet with our stakeholders. And at some time in the future, the staff may become permanent, but at this time, we want to have a period where we can have our economic development activities taken care of, and then we will move forward to build a framework around our new economic development program. So with that being said, you have a motion that we create this department and a second. Any further discussion or comments? Are you ready to vote? All in favor, raise your right hand. Aye. Mr. Templeton, he said aye. So that is a unanimous vote, and we thank council for that. At the beginning of our regular meeting, we need to have our invocation and our pledge of allegiance. So if you would stand with me at this time, we will do so. For some reason, they have me on here to pray, but I'm going to ask Dr. Moats if he would pray for us.
Thank you. Bow with me, please. Our Father, we come to you oftentimes in life when things are good and when things are bad, and when things are just normal. And tonight we find ourselves in situations which are some are good and some are tough and most are normal. But the lesson we learn, Father, is that you walk with us through every event. You never leave us. You hold us with everlasting arms. You bless us. You guide us as much as we're willing to be guided. And you love us. We thank you, Father, for the privilege we have to serve in this community. We pray that you will use our collective wisdom to do the things that are best and good and proper for the citizens of our county. Thank you for that honor and for that privilege. And we offer this prayer of your presence with us in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You have been provided a copy of the minutes of the July 7th, 2020 regular meeting and the July 14th, 2020 special call meeting. Are there any changes to those minutes? If there are not, then I would entertain a motion that they be approved.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Motion by Ms. Childs, second by Ms. Spencer. Any questions or comments? All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
And that's unanimous. We have a number of presentations tonight. And our first presentation is an introduction of the Greenwood City County building official. I'll turn that over to the county manager at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of council. If you'll recall, earlier this year, longtime Chief Building Inspector Lawrence Oots retired after a long and distinguished career with the city and the county. Julie Wilkie with the city was challenged with the significant task of filling Lawrence's shoes. Fortunately, I was able to participate in that process, and I believe that we as a group, and Julie specifically, selected a great person for us. His name is James Whitaker. He comes out of the Low Country, spent a long time in construction and construction inspection. I think he's been very fair, been very balanced, brought a great attitude to the department and to working with the citizens. So, Mr. Chairman, I present James Whitaker to you.
Mr. Whitaker. Please come forward, Mr. Whitaker. We want to interrogate you. We just wanted to meet you and you get to know you and you get to know us. I think we're unique in Greenwood in that we have a city-county building inspection department. Always believe the fact that you don't have to worry about the city limit line or things of that nature when you come in. You got the same person doing the building inspections inside and out. Welcome to Greenwood. We appreciate you being here. Anything you'd like to say to us? Tell us about the department, your views or anything, you're welcome to do it now.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity of being employed here. It is a very good city. I've enjoyed it. I'm originally from Anderson County. I was there 19 years. Then I was down in North Charleston for the past 5 years. So I've had experience with county and jurisdiction, how they do different things, and they are different. But it's such a friendly place here. Everybody I've run into are so nice and welcoming and warm. But I know there are going to be some changes. I will notify council and the city county administrator, with some changes that I'm proposing. And it's not big changes. It's just stuff that should have been done and just get more things more organized and a little bit more efficient. That's my goal. And anytime a member of y'all have a question or something like that, please feel free to contact me.
We appreciate what you do. We know it's a tough job when you have to enforce the building codes. You don't write the building codes, you just have to enforce them.
That is correct. Yes, sir.
And there's a lot of discretion on your part,
Yes.
and that makes it tough. So we appreciate that job. And council have any comments or questions, Mr. Whitaker?
Just welcome to Greenwood. Mr.
Yeah,
Thank you.
welcome to Greenwood, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Our next presentation is boat capacity study, Robert Russian.
I want to thank council for giving me the opportunity to present this study. The study was actually performed the second half of last year. The full study was forwarded to us in March, and we finalized it recently, just tidying up a few things. I apologize, in your packets, I believe you received a copy of the full study. It does say draft across it. It is a final version of it. It's not a draft version, so the final version is the exact copy that you have. I'm not going to go through the whole study, but just wanted to kind of hit the highlights real quick. It'll take 5-10 minutes of your time. First, why do we need a study? The study was originally was born out of the Lake Greenwood Master Plan Committee. The need for how many boats we have on the lake, what the capacity is, what we want the capacity to be. It was born out of that, but it is applicable to the next item on our agenda, so wanted to present it kind of in conjunction with that as well. So how much is too much or how much is too little? At the last State of the Lake meeting we had, and I think I even presented at Connecticut Lake Greenwood, I showed two pictures. The first picture is a picture with a very, what I would consider kind of a crowded lake, boats tied up together, a lot of boats out there recreating together. A lot of people would tell you this is an excellent day on the lake and this is how they love to see the lake. But there's a whole other group out there that thinks the picture on the right, which is a very wide open lake with very little boats, that's how they like to enjoy the lake. So when you start talking about how much is too much or how much is too little, it's really a matter of personal preference for each person. So, but for planning, for safety, for environmental concerns, we need solid factual data. So that's what we kind of attempted to start with this capacity study. This is a framework. It's not a full package. It's a first look at what boat capacity on the lake looks like or what we'd like it to look like, and kind of starts the whole data collection process. It's not by any means a finished product. It's a start or framework to how we're going to count boats and measure boat density going forward. So just want to say that going forward. And then once we have good usable data, we have some start to good data, but once we have good usable data, we can then start making decisions based upon that data, future planning decisions. So as part of this study, there were kind of two methods that were looked at. First method was an empirical analysis. So the empirical analysis, we essentially counted up all the number of residential docks, commercial marina slips, all those docks out there that have the capacity to hold a boat. So we counted up all those areas. There's about 5,433 docks, slips, whatever, that could hold a boat out there on the lake. That number seems kind of high to me when you first go at it, but 5,433 areas to hold a boat out on the lake. We then assumed a percentage for how much of those slips would actually contain the boat and be actually used on the lake. We chose an odd number, which is 3.6%. 3.6% is the low end of a number that came from a Bosley report. Throughout the study, they frequently referenced the Bosley report. The Bosley report was a 2005 summary of a bunch of other, and review of a bunch of other boat capacity reports, and they kind of summarize it all and give some good data. That report's out there on the web for people to view the full Bosley report if you want to. But that's kind of what some of the assumptions are based on. So we use this 3.6%, and if 3.6% of all those slips, docks, and boats or that are out there where an actual boat is actually being used at any one time, 3.6% of that 5,433 boats or slips comes out to 195 boats that would be on the lake on an average day. Next, we count other ways that people would get a boat onto the lake. That's your public boat parking spots. Counting up the county-owned ramps, the commercial ramps and marinas that have boat parking, the total amount of boat parking spots that we had out there was 481 places that you could park a boat at some sort of public entity around the lake launch a boat and put it into the lake. And we're gonna say on any one day, or as an average, that 50% of those spots would be taken up. So that would be 240 boats that would be launched in the lake. You add those two together, we get a total of 435 boats, okay, by those assumptions. And again, all these assumptions, especially in the empirical analysis part of it, as we gather more and more data, we'll continue to refine those assumptions to figure out exactly a better percentage or number to use. But we have 435 total boats on an average day, weekend, whatever, that would be on the lake. So that's an empirical analysis, just making a physical count of the areas on the lake that could house a boat, park a boat, and then how much of those would actually be out on the lake. The second method that they use is a physical boat count, actually dividing the lake up into sections and counting the number of boats that are out there on the lake on a particular time of day. So when we divided the lake up into 5 sections, the section number 1, I'm going to go through all 5 of these, but section number 1 is the lower lake near the dam all the way up to Grand Harbor. Section number 2 is Grand Harbor up to the lower train trestle. Section 3 is the lower train trestle to the Saluda and Reedy Split. And then section 4 and section 5 are the Reedy River and the Saluda River as well. So, but just to keep it, it's counting the sections from the dam as you go up further lake, the larger the number, the further up the lake you are. Pay special attention to section number 3. Section number 3 is the lower train trestle to the Saluda Reedy Split. That is the section where the 72-221 bridge comes across, Kaufman's Bridge. That is what we consider our main gateway across the lake and what is the busiest section of the lake. So section 3 is that middle portion of the lake at the bridge. And then section 4 is Reedy River, and we'll talk about those as well. Now, by our boat counts, those were the 2 where we found the 2 highest density of boats at for the lake. So, and again, the assumptions based on the Boswell report. So to figure out boat density, we first take the total surface of water throughout the lake, the total number of acres that has water on it, and we're using a number of 10,461 acres. Now, depending on who you ask and what is actually part of Lake Greenwood, some organization like DNR had that number up as high as 11,400 something acres, depending on how far up the rivers you go and if you count the islands or not count the islands. But we're going to use a very conservative low number of 10,461 acres. That was what was measured by GIS as to being the total surface water that we're going to consider for this report. Again, a low conservative number. We want to make sure we kind of pick some low numbers for that. We then take out a shoreline buffer zone of 100 feet. So out of that 10,461 acres, we know that all of that's not usable acreage. We need to take out what's close to the shoreline, which wouldn't be areas that you would recreate in, where the docks are placed at. Our average dock is roughly around 50 foot. We have a no-wake zone of another 50 foot beyond that. We picked 100 feet as a area that we would not necessarily count to recreate in. So that brings our usable acreage of the lake down to 8,185 acres. That is 78% on a conservative basis of the total water that's out there. So right at the top, we cut off 22% of the lake and say, we're not going to use that for boat density. That's a part of the lake that's not really used to recreate so much. Again, we're very conservative approach to these numbers. And then we said we wanted to choose a boat density that's boat per acres. How many acres we want for each individual boat to recreate it. We chose 15 acres. We chose 15 acres because the majority of recreational activities you're going to do out in the lake, you can do within 15 acres. You want to pull a tube, you can do it in 15 acres. You want to water ski, you can do it within 15 acres. You want to fish, you can have 15 acres yourself. So we chose a 15 acre per boat density before we counted anything and said, you know what, let's target that number. As we go on, count more data, as we refine this as we go down the road, we might raise that number, lower that number, depending on what our boat counts are and what we want as a lake as far as density goes. But 1 boat for 15 acres is where we kind of started at. So that would put our maximum boat capacity. If you take the 8,185 acres, you divide it by 15 acres, you get a maximum boat capacity for the whole lake of 546 boats. Okay, and boats, we're saying boats are boats or personal watercraft, jet skis, we're lumping them up there. So remember that number 546 because that's by our assumptions, what we're considering the total number of boats that would be on the lake and still meet that 15 acre per boat capacity. We're going to break down the capacity by section. Again, section 1 is down by the dam. It's by the dam up to Grand Harbor. Section 2, Grand Harbor to the lower train trestle. Section 3 is the middle of the lake, the busiest part, lower train trestle to the split, and then 4 or 5 are the two rivers up above the lake there. So by that, we have a carrying capacity or number of boats for each one of those sections. Again, bring your attention to section 3. We could put 89 boats in section 3 and still have 15 acres per boat for that individual boat to recreate. Want to give you an idea of what 15 acres looks like on the lake? Inside of that blue shape there is 15 acres exactly. If you take a straight line from the break on the lake docks over to the 45 dock on the other side, you have your 100-foot buffer along the land and the bridge. That area right there is 15 acres. When you sit out there at the break on the lake docks and look across the lake, that's a large area. That's the area we're saying each individual boat has to recreate in. Just gives you a little bit of idea for what 15 acres looks like on the lake and how much space it takes up. Physical boat counts. Physical counts were taken on July 5th. That's a holiday weekend. It's actually a Friday, the holiday weekend, and September 21st, which was the Saturday after Labor Day. Obviously, July 5th is a busy weekend, holiday weekend. September 21st after Labor Day, you would expect boat counts to be down, but still a time of the year. It was a nice Saturday when there's still recreation going on at the lake. Those are our actual boat counts for those individual days. On the afternoon of July 5th, we actually ran into some weather and we only counted 2 of the 5 sections. But bring your attention to the July daily average. And that number's a little small for me to read from here, but we had 285 average boats that were on the lake on that July day. So again, we're comparing to the 546 total boats that the lake can handle if we have one boat for 15 acres. We're at 285, so we're about half of that, just a little over half. Our September daily average was 128 boats on the lake. So that's well below the 546. Obviously, you would expect less boats on a weekend after Labor Day. But that gives you an idea how many boats are out there on the lake on those 2 days. I will bring your attention to the afternoon of July 5th in Section 3. Remember, our boat capacity for Section 3 was 89 boats. We counted 95 boats on that day, that afternoon, when we counted boats in that section. So while the lake as a whole was well below our total capacity, that section was right there, just slightly above the capacity we had set for 15 acres per boat. So again, the capacity was 89, we hit 95. And on the next slide, you'll see that by acreage, and in Section 3, you only had 14 acres per boat to recreate in that particular section. So again, below the 15 that we initially set as our target, but still had 14 acres per boat. And the rest of the lake was well above the 15 acres. So if you were looking for more space, there's plenty of acres on the lake to go find some more space. But as far as boat density goes, our July average, if you look at the whole lake, again, each boat that was on the lake that day could have had 29 acres to recreate in. In September, they had almost 64 acres to recreate in, each individual boat. Obviously, that's a lot of acreage. But again, if you're in Section 3, the number of boats we had in there, you only had about 14 acres to recreate in. So again, a little bit above our assumption. Some initial conclusions. Again, I don't want to spend too much time on it because we have a lot more data to collect. But when we talked about method 1, the empirical analysis, the 3.6% of the total boats and slips and everything, we never got anywhere near the 485 when we counted boats. So my thought is that 3.6% we assumed is too high, and as we continue to count boats, we'll continue to refine that number for. That helps us relate the number of docks and slips we have out there for future planning purposes, relating it to the density we have on the lake based upon docks and parking spaces. And that number could be very important in the future when we start talking about down the line whether we want to limit docks on the lake or whether we want to limit marina slips or whatever. When we get to a boating density that we feel is either unsafe or is where we want to be for boating density. So in the future, that number will be very important to refine that number. For our physical boat counts, first of all, they're tough to do by boat. You can't see the whole lake, the whole section at once. You have to go in and out of coves. We initially considered using drones or something like that to do it. We decided on a physical, going by boat is the easiest way to do it. But in the future, we might look at the use of drones and or the use of local pilots to do boat counts on the lake to get a more instantaneous look at what's out there in the lake. You're out there on the boat, you go into the cove, you come back out, you see a boat, did I count that one already? Did I not? You get a good number, but it could be better if you got, it from a different vantage point. So we'll look at some different technology for that. Dividing the lake by sections really helps us to focus on the different areas of the lake. When I started this, I was not thinking that the Reedy River would have the second highest density of boats, but the numbers so far say that the Reedy River, and there's some areas up there that people do congregate on weekends that drives boat traffic in and out of the Reedy. And the size of it certainly plays in as well, but I just didn't expect that. I expected the lower part of the lake, closer to the dam, to have more boats, and in reality, that really wasn't the case. People don't seem to recreate down on the lower end of the lake. The two busiest sections of the lake are the section 3 and section 4. Again, the middle of the lake and the Reedy River. And then looking at boat density, we assume the 15 acres per boat. That allows for all those various types of recreation. But what type of lake do we want to be? Do we want to eventually set a density higher or lower? Do we like that 15 acres? As we collect more and more data, we'll get a better picture of what that density looks like to make some of those decisions. And again, we need more data, but for the majority of the year, that lake, from our assumptions, it's well below the capacity of 546 boats, and probably we're looking at more of managing boats in areas as opposed to the overall lake. But if you're on the lake and you are in an area where you think there's too many boats around, there's a whole lot of lake to go to to find space right now. That's kind of the bottom line, was that the majority of the lake is probably really underused when it comes to boats and recreating out there. Again, this is a framework for us to start in. We're developing a plan now to gather a lot more data, having some of our lake management staff doing it and looking at the cost of having drones or pilots do it. But I'll be certain to take any questions you might have about this study. I will say that the study, after it was distributed to you all on Friday, we did put it out to the 2 lake groups. They did share it on social media. The comments were varied. Some were comments about the study itself and maybe didn't understand it. Again, we told everyone we're presenting tonight, and we do have members of both lake groups here tonight to view the presentation.
When you mentioned earlier the capacity excess, I think you said 89 to 95 or something like that at one portion. Was that the daily average over all day long, or was that at one moment in time?
So we don't have an instantaneous look at the entire lake. So when we're out there counting, we're out there, going up the lake from one section to the next and counting in each individual. So when we're doing the physical boat count, that's counting boats over several hours. That's why the technology might be a little better, where you can get an more instantaneous count. You fly a drone over the lake or pilot over the lake, it might only take you an hour to count the whole lake. By boat, it takes you several hours, and you're not getting in the back of every cove and everything. You're going to miss a few or by boat where you might be a little bit more accurate by. So for the physical counts, it's a period of hours that you're counting boats, so it's not necessarily instantaneous. When you're talking about the empirical, that's just counting up the number of docks on the lake, the number of boat parking spaces, and trying to correlate that to the number of boats that would actually be using the lake on an average day.
Yeah, the disproportionate north end is the sandbar.
Yeah, and it didn't. You get a lot of boats up there. There's a bunch of boats sitting on the sandbar. You go up you count 20 boats sitting on the sandbar. That's going to skew your numbers. But it's a place that they recreate, and boats got to get in and out of there. We have the River Fork Landing, not far from there. That it's very easy. If someone wants to go to sandbar, they can put in at River Fork, go up there, come back. You have the public access right there. My thought is that it's an accessible place on the lake for the general public to get out there.
Yeah, if there's 20 there, it's in the middle of a lightning storm.
So
That'd be 50 or 60.
yeah, that's kind of what's driving. I will also say too that our former engineer, she volunteered some of her hours and time to do some of these counts, and she made the comment that those July 5th numbers, that's not worst case. It was a July 4th weekend, but they had some weather that afternoon. and, you know, she felt like that it wasn't, you know, where the lake was completely packed. The comment was also made that by a lot of people that this year, whether it's because of the pandemic or whether it's renewed, you know, interest in boating, that this year seems to be a lot busier on the lake. I think that form of recreation during the pandemic has been a favored one. So there's a lot of people saying right now that the boat traffic has really picked up on the lake. As we continue to count, we'll get a better idea of that density.
Do you have any concern that that Boswell report's 15 years old?
No, there's newer ones out. I think, you know, and they didn't just look at the Bosley report. They looked at a bunch of different reports, but they quoted the Bosley one for some of their numbers because it was a summary of other reports. I'll give you an example. You know, when you look at one report, sometimes they narrow in on the type of lake or the type of recreation that they want. The Bosley report, in one section, they talked about boat density, and they said, you know, targeted boat densities were anywhere from 1.5 acres per boat to like 1,500 acres per boat. So, you know, there's obviously that wide range of tells you different people wanting different things out of their lake or out of their body of water. You know, that 1,500 acres per boat might be preserved up in Alaska somewhere where they don't allow any boats on the lake. You know, the 1.5 might be a small, you know, very small lake somewhere where it's, you know, completely a recreational lake, you know, used for nothing else. So that, you know, what you want your lake to be. But that Bosley report was a good summary. That's why they kind of quoted and used some of the numbers in it. But no, again, they looked at other surveys as well. They just happened to reference that one in this report.
There's a footnote that says limiting sampling efforts to 2 days during this study does not meet sampling frequencies found in other boating capacity studies.
They started us.
For a novice on boat studies, as I am, that tells me that the 2 days you used was less than what is normally used to determine the number of boats on the lake.
Correct.
Then does that invalidate this study?
No, it's what this study was giving us a starting point or a framework to go forward. That data, all the data I showed you, those counts, it's not statistically enough to provide solid conclusions on it. As we build that database with more and more and more counts, you know, dozens and dozens of counts, we'll get closer to a statistical norm. Obviously, we didn't want to pay contractors to go out there and do 20 boat counts. It would have cost us an absolute fortune. But we can continue on those boat counts by more economic, more, you know, that fit our budget, whether it's our personnel doing it or hiring someone at a much lower cost, you know, to do those boat counts. So we fit those, and it's really 2 days, 4 boat counts that, you know, we commissioned as part of the study to start the process. Again, by no means final. We need to continue to add data to that.
I had to look up in the dictionary what empirical means. And if I understand it right, it's the actual boat count. That's the empirical data. It's not some assumption. So if you're going to do an empirical analysis, am I right or wrong in that the best way is to actually add more days, and whether you do it with drones or aircraft or physically count whatever, but that would make this study a little bit more convincing if we used more real data.
Correct. And the empirical part of it, the empirical was counting docks, counting boat slips at marinas, and see how they correlate to actual boat traffic. But the empirical part, it didn't count a single boat. All it did was count spaces where boats could be parked and then try to correlate that to what boats would actually be on the lake. The physical boat count was where we actually counted boats and then tried to match that back to the empirical for planning purposes. So again, it's a start. We need to collect a lot more data for these assumptions to play out as to what we actually have out there.
Any other questions by council?
Can I ask you, where are we headed with this?
With this,
Yeah, you're doing this study, it costs us some money, what are we gonna do with it?
so as we add more and more data to it, we get a feel for, one, how many boats are out there in the lake. We have raw data that says how many boats are on there. And then we start evaluating the data. More and more data points, we start evaluating. All right, how many boats are out there on a holiday weekend? How many boats are out there on an off weekend? How many boats are out there on a Tuesday afternoon, whenever? So we get a feel for how many boats are out there. Then we decide how many boats do we want out there and feel that we can still be safe on the lake. And then we start looking at further on down the road, those planning things. How many more docks do we allow on the lake? We have over 5,000 docks on the lake right now. Do we want to limit that to 10,000, 15,000? At some point, we get to a number that says we don't want any more docks on the lake because now it's the amount of boats that it's going to bring to the lake is going to be an unsafe number or it's going to be bad for the environment. But until we count them and correlate that to the number of docks or slips out there, we don't know where we're at. So we're counting them now, and somewhere down the line in the future, we're adding somewhere between, 25 to 35 new docks every year right now. As residential building picks up, that number is going to pick up. And you're going to continue, we're adding more docks to the lake faster than we're taking them out. We remove some from time to time, but the vast majority, they're out there, and they're out there for good. So at some point you get to a saturation level. Again, we're at 5,000 now. We don't want 50,000 out there. That's probably not a good number. But what is a good number to start limiting that? And this data eventually, as we continue to collect it, we'll develop a number that for docks, for access, for whatever, that says, all right, we need to start limiting access to the lake. We need to start limiting the number of docks. I think we're far away from that, but we need to start collecting data now so we know where that number's coming, where it's coming from down the road.
This may be for another meeting or another hour or so, but I don't have a boat and I'm not out on the water, but I read both websites that put a lot of information. And it seems like the greatest problem we have on the lake now is not the number of boats, but the action of the people who are in those boats. And it seems like the people are crying for some type of enforcement of the rules that are on the lake, and there doesn't seem to be adequate enforcement of some of this, and the people who are out on the lake are suffering at the expense of these other people who just do anything they want to. And it seems like to me we need to move forward either through DNR or whomever to get more enforcement of the actual rules and regs on the lake. It seems there's just a lot of information on the websites of just, bad judgment and ignoring and sometimes dangerous type actions that's going on.
We're currently developing some signage to address the 50-foot rule, the no wake within, you have to be at idle speed within 50 foot of a dock, an anchored boat, a wharf, a pier, whatever. We're currently trying to develop some signage, and we're trying to do it in a way that, one, it's the last thing people see before they go out onto a boat, so it's the last thing in their mind, and then trying to come up with a catchy phrase, a slogan, or whatever, that helps them to remember that anytime I'm within 50 foot of any of this stuff, so I need to be at idle speed. You're going to have people all the time, but making sure people are educated, that's our job, is the education part, to make sure people know that when they're within 50 foot, they have to be at idle speed. But then the enforcement part comes down to DNR or the sheriff's office who have boats out there. I think the enforcement part of it is a resource issue. DNR, they're willing to do the enforcement. The number of people and boats they have to be out there to do that enforcement, makes it tough. And then when they do get out on the lake, what are they stopping? Are they stopping people to check for life preservers? Are they checking for intoxicated people operating the boat? Are they looking for those that are operating the boat recklessly? There's a whole bunch of things that they're looking for out there, and they can't be on that. If they have 3 boats on the lake, there's 10,000 acres out there for them to be patrolling. It's tough to catch people in the act. It's not like they can sit on a road with a radar gun in a spot that they know is speed all the time. That 50-foot roll, that's the whole lake. So targeting some of them. We've been talking both with DNR and talked about signage for education, and that's part of our platform. But you'll probably see some signage in the next few months. Originally, we thought DNR was going to go in with us on the signage. Now they back away from a little bit of that. So the signage you'll see will have the Greenwood County logo, some sort of catchy slogan about the 50-foot rule, and actually quote the law that the 50-foot rule is based on.
I was a little amazed that the consultant did not look at or did not quote, maybe I'm way off base, but did not quote boat registrations. It seems like to me those numbers of boats that are registered in Greenwood County and Lawrence County, Newberry County, to me, should be somewhere in this study, because that gives me an actual potential. Instead of counting boat slips, you can have a boat slip, you don't have a boat. But if you look at boat registrations, those are hard numbers, and I know, but I didn't see anything in this study about boat registrations.
So early on, we talked a little bit about boat registration, but we didn't pursue that number, as part of this study. But that'd be part of the empirical part of it. How many boat registrations, how many boat slips, how many boat parking spots. Even if you had 1 million boat registrations, you only have so many places to park a boat, to get a boat in the water if you don't actually live on the lake, with a dock. So there's still a limiting factor of getting into the lake. How many people you to get into the lake by public access or beyond what we have out there for private docks.
But those numbers would tell me something about what my potential and on the holidays, the July 4th and some of these others, that's when a percentage, how you would come up with some kind of ratio of the number of legitimate boat owners are in that lake, and I don't know. It seems like to me that it needs to be massaged a good bit to make it a useful document going forward. I mean, I don't think you can declare anything to us today.
No, I think, again, framework, initial count, this is some conclusions we see from just those initial counts. We have a lot more data to collect, a lot more.
But I mean, I respect it as a beginning. It's just, it's a work that's continuing. You're gonna have to take it and continue to massage it. So, any other questions by council? Thank you. Our next item of business is to review a proposed Lake Greenwood boating access conceptual designs, Davis and Floyd.
Just to introduce, at past meetings, council has approved the hiring of a design consultant to design a boat ramp for the 72-221 property. Davis and Floyd has done that. When we were last before council, we told you we would come back with 3 conceptual designs. One design would be heavy on boat parking, maximize the amount of boat parking. The second design would be maximizing recreational activity along with boat parking for this property. And the third one would be a combination of those two. So Davis and Floyd has done some high-level conceptuals. They've done some very high-level pricing on it. Again, very high-level pricing. And they're here to present those 3 concepts today.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate y'all having us this evening. Like Rob said, we're on contract with the county to look at and design the boating facility at 7221 between that highway and the break on the lake. And we're here tonight to present these 3 options. Our contract overall was to the first step was doing some due diligence work, which includes the master plan studies, but also doing a topographic survey of the property and also doing a geotechnical exploration, which both of those tasks have been completed now. And so that kind of got us into a position that we could develop these 3 conceptual plans. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan Hertzfeld with me tonight. He's going to take you through the details on the 3 plans. And then once he does that, then there's some photos I want to show you that you can kind of get an idea of what kind of facilities we're talking about.
Good evening. As Brent and Rob mentioned, Davis and Floyd was tasked with coming up with 3 concepts that I'd like to go over with you. Up on the screen right now is concept 1. Well, before I get into concept 1, there's a few amenities that are consistent throughout all 3 concepts that I want to touch base with you first. The first amenity is the restroom facility. This restroom facility is a pre-constructed restroom facility. It's 4 stalls, which would connect directly into an existing sewer line on site and tap into existing water on site. Amenity 2 is the picnic areas. These are a 12 by 12 concrete pad with a picnic table, a grill, and a trash can. Another amenity would be the kiosk areas. This would be information posted about the lake. And then the last amenity is obviously the dock. There'd be 2 boat launches with a courtesy dock in between. So those are all consistent throughout all 3 concepts. So as we get into concept 1, let me get you orientated with the layout here. Highway 221 is on the bottom portion of the page. The Lake Greenwood is off to the right portion of the drawing, and then the large parking area owned by the county is at the top of the drawing. So option 1 or layout 1 has a focus on boat parking and boat access to the lake. So this is maxed out potential boat parking for the site. Right now it's calling for 49 boat parking spaces with 2 additional 88 boat parking spaces. As you enter this site, the flow of traffic is one-way counterclockwise. And as you make your way around to the boat launch, we try to provide ample space for novice and people who are might be uncomfortable backing up boats. We provide ample opportunity for that and ample space. Once they back their boat up down the ramp and unload their boat, they would then proceed along the top portion or the top drive aisle, and all parking is set at a 45-degree angle. This is for ease to pull in and back your boat out. As we get into the amenities for this site, as stated before, the amenities or the recreational facility on this are minimal. The restroom on this option is on the right side of the drawing there, inside that parking island. This location was chosen for ease of access from any boater that might have docked. The courtesy dock would have easy access to get up to the restroom facility without having to walk across the site. The additional amenities on this would be 5 of those 12 by 12 picnic areas up there along the north or the top side of the parking lot. Each of those do have their own designated standard vehicular parking spaces with 1 ADA space. These are all connected with a concrete sidewalk, which follows the top of the parking area and actually leads to the large parking lot at the top for overflow. So that's option 1.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
Could you use your pointer
Oh,
when
sorry.
you have an opportunity to? I'm having a bit of trouble following.
Oh, there it is. Okay. So here's the restroom facility. I'll kind of go over the amenities. Here's the restroom facility. The boat launch and boat dock are over here. Lake Greenwood's out here. They're kind of hard to see, but there's 5 12 by 12 picnic areas with standard parking. For those, there is a sidewalk that runs along the edge of the parking space that actually comes up here and connects into the larger parking space up here. Is there anything specific that?
Yeah.
So as we move into option 2, this option has a focus on recreation. As you notice, the big difference in this option is the center area right here. What's been done is there's been basically a small park area inserted within the parking space and kind of divides the lot. Inside this area, there is a playground with safety surface with a sidewalk around it. To its left is a pavilion, a picnic shelter with picnic tables and a grill with an open lawn space for play. And then on the right side, we have shifted the restroom facility to be more central to the recreational space. We also provided here to kind of splits the difference for the recreational spaces without providing too far of a walk for the boaters. Similar to the first option, This also has additional picnic spaces that run along the north side of the site. This has 10 picnic shelters or picnic pads, 7 up top. There's 2 over here, and then 1 actually down by the water in case someone wanted to dock and then actually have lunch or something on land. And again, similar to option 1, again, this connects through and provides additional access to here. So it's just to the above parking lot. This one does actually have a lot of additional 90-degree parking for standard cars to help accommodate the recreational facility. And then moving on to option 2, this one is, or 3, this one is actually the hybrid of the 2. The big difference in option 2 and option 3 is really the placement for the park. Option 2 integrated the park in the parking lot, like inside the parking lot, kind of made it one item. This actually pulls it out and kind of isolates it to the rear of the property, and really separates the 2 uses. The other big difference on this one is that the restroom facility is again back down by the lake. There's the kiosks have been moved from instead of by the docks. They're now kind of in this small concrete pad that has the kiosks in the restroom. This one, option 2, actually, if I can step back, we shot for a minimum boat parking of 20 spaces. We tried to hold that. We could increase that, but we were trying to focus on recreation. Option 3 has 33 spaces and 2 ADA spaces for boat parking. So we've pushed the parking up, but we've tried to keep a lot of the same amenities that were provided in option 2. And again, similar, we have the additional picnic spaces up here on the north side, with one over here by the lake. And then again, similar to option 2, we have the picnic pavilion here with a playground in the center with some picnic areas that kind of spoke off that circle.
Just for another minute here, we'll continue on. Just want to, we talked about the picnic shelters and the restroom facilities. So I'm going to show you some photos now of what we're talking about. This is a photo of some existing facilities that we've designed. This is actually on Lake Norman. This shows you the vast area of the turnaround area that Ryan was referring to earlier. You want to make sure that we have plenty of room that a novice driver could get his boat and trailer, get it turned around, get it backed up, and be able to get his boat into the water. This is the boat launch and the courtesy dock that we would be proposing to construct here. If you look at the boat, the launch photo, that's the ramp. We shoot for about a 12 to 15% slope to get into the water. We want about 4 or 5 foot of water depth at the end of this ramp in low water conditions. Based on our topographic survey, we can achieve that with about a 100-foot ramp. The width of that ramp is 16 feet. That's an outside of curve. You notice the curves are there for 2 purposes. One is almost as a guide so that people can see where to back their boat up, and it's also and so they don't drop off the side of the ramp as they're backing up, which causes a problem. But it's also there as a structural element in that if the area that's underneath the boat ramp, if there's some buoys underneath when we put the riprap in, that the ramp will sit on, this almost serves as a beam that will span across that, so it won't be impacted by any kind of buoys that will come underneath the ramp. The loading dock is an aluminum dock. It's got piles on it, the steel piles that come out. That allows basically the dock's a floating dock, so as the lake waters rises and goes down, then the dock will basically rise on those piles and it kind of holds it in place. It has ties on the dock. It also it can come with some rails that people can help to load and unload their boats. This is and again, these are just samples. You don't have to go over this. There's a ton of options that you can go with. But the picnic pavilion that Ryan was referring to, that's just a picture of that. There's 4 picnic tables that can be underneath that pavilion. The restroom facility is a pre-manufactured building. As Ryan mentioned, it's got 4 stalls in it. It can come with 2. We're pricing one that has 4 stalls. Men and women is ADA accessible. Water and sewer on this side portion is available, so these can come with a tank underneath it, but that's not going to be the case. We don't need that for this. This will be a wet situation that will tie water and sewer directly in. I think it's really important here to consider two things. Number one is the aesthetics. This is a very visible location as you come into Greenwood County across the bridge. So we don't want to put out facilities that just don't look good. We want them to be aesthetically pleasing. And we think these types of facilities meet that. And also, unfortunately, when you have recreation areas, they tend to take a lot of abuse from the public. And we want to make sure we're designing durable facilities to withstand that. The kiosk that can come in different options. Again, this is just kind of an information, a place that you put information on the lake. And those are just a couple different options: kiosk, grills, the trash receptacles. Trash is a big issue that we'll need to look at really hard. These places can get trashed really bad on busy weekends. So there's these are kind of heavy duty trash receptacles that we can put up at the picnic sites, and of course the little grills that people can use. Playground area, kind of small little playground equipment that we recommend out here. Then the picnic area that Ryan's talking about, the 12 by 12, that's what that is. That's a heavy duty picnic table that's actually bolted down into the concrete itself. You'll be amazed what people can do with loose type of tables. A lot of times they'll end up in the water body itself. These have tamper resistant bolts that a person can't come in there and take that apart and take the seat away or take the tabletop away. These tables can come as a standard table or as an ADA table as well. So with that, that's our goal tonight is to present you these three options. We're ready to move on into the full design of this project, but we're going to need guidance on these three options on which one we want to proceed with. With that, I'll open up the questions.
One thing I want to make a comment I want to make before, as you guys look through these options, kind of think of it as a la carte. If there's one item you like from one plan you don't like on another, you can kind of mix and match them together. So just keep that in mind.
I only have one concern, and that is that seems like with all of the amenities that you have added to these plans, then all we're going to be doing is creating another boat launch like we have on the Lawrence County side, where people come in there and the boaters can't use it because people are swimming. And I never envisioned this as a park. I envisioned it absolutely as a boat launch. And until tonight, I never even thought about gazebos and picnic shelters and all of that. I thought of a maximum number of boat slips that we could get there. And I wanted it to look nice. I'm not talking about something that looks unpleasing. But I think with everything that I've seen, and it's nice, there's nothing, I just think you're gonna have people coming in there picnicking or doing whatever. They're gonna take up parking spaces that's intended for the boats. Those are probably gonna be the people that leave the trash. And before you know it, they're gonna be in the water swimming like they are over on Lawrence County side. Mm-hmm. And that bothers me. And maybe I'm the only one that it bothers. But I never thought that's what we were wanting in that boat launch.
Yeah.
Now that's mine, council. Y'all tell me if I'm all wrong. That's the first thing. The design and everything is pretty. I like everything you got. I just don't want a swimming area there. And you say, well, you can stop them from swimming. Oh no, come on. Toby's gonna have somebody out there on the weekend. I don't know, Toby, how you feel about the recreation part around there, but I feel like it's gonna turn into the same thing on the Lawrence side.
That, Mr. Chairman, that was one of the questions I've asked Rob is how are we going to maintain this? That's my biggest concern. I've got some serious concerns about how we're going to maintain this many amenities in one site.
And if you can get more boat places, that's what the people have been telling me they want is places they're not looking for places to recreate, they're looking for places to park their boat and get into lake. So.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Some months ago, we passed, approval for the Palmetto Crossing people to put pavilions or something for their golf carts to people that are gonna buy those expensive condos up there on top of the hill. Where are they going on this plot?
Go to one of those pictures that show.
They're already in on the other parcel.
They're on the other parcel.
Go back to one that's a map. Doesn't matter which one.
But if we put this in there, they can drive their golf carts down there because it's public property.
Dr. Bogus, I believe there's somewhere
Right in there.
right in this area, if I'm right. Somebody else knows better, tell me.
And they're having pavilions and picnic areas and things like that as well, and a place to park their boat if they have one, right?
Right, for their residents, not for the general public.
No, I know, but there's another issue about keeping them separated.
Any questions or comments by the
Mr.
council
Brown,
members?
can I address your comment?
Yes.
Yeah, if you go back, you can go back to concept one, go back 2 more slides. Concept one, you know, our instruction was to look at different options. You know, we're not recommending 1, 2, or 3. But go to your comment about maximizing boat parking. That's what this plan does. When you look at this, the only thing you're looking at here is you're looking at 50, I think it's 51 total boat parking places, 2 of those being ADA accessible. The only amenities that you see on this plan is the restroom facility, which I understand is a high demand, high need on the lake. It's a CXD, what we call a CXD facility, which is the restroom facility. And there's only 5 picnic tables on the site, which you can or cannot do. So this does maximize, this is the maximum number of boat parking that you can get on this site.
And that would be what I think needs to be there.
Yes, and that's what we're presenting tonight is to get direction on which of these options do we want to proceed with.
Mr. Allison?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I agree that option 1 is probably, and I totally agree with what you're saying. We're spending a lot of money in other areas on parks, and I think we need to maximize the boat parking. I do think, I like the picture of the shelter. I like a shelter, so if our high school groups have a fishing tournament, they've got somewhere to go under to weigh in, and then if you're caught out on your boat in bad weather, you could go under it and get some shelter. So I think there's some needs for the shelter and all. The playground and all, I agree. I don't think that's really, so basically 1 is what, your first is basically what we were asking for because we wanted the maximum. And I think that's about the maximum parking you can get for a boat there.
Can you look at a shelter on number 1?
Yeah, yes, sir. In fact, if you look at the kind of on the plan north of that sheet where you see the 2 little parking bump outs, see what I'm talking about there? Yeah, right there. We right now we're showing a couple of picnic shelter or picnic table spots in there. There's enough room there that the picnic shelter that I showed you the building, that structure would fit in that area.
That's real close to the concept I thought.
Yeah, I think of that shelter there, that if they did need to weigh in or bad weather or whatever, but all of the other stuff, it seems like we're just encouraging people to use it for the purpose it's not intended.
Yeah, I agree, and I think all the other amenities that we showed. I mean, this is a highly visible, a very busy area, and those types of facilities are better suited, I think, in a more remote, kind of off the beaten path location than this part right here.
And I think the restroom being closer to the actual boat launch is better than being
And the way these facilities lay out is just, you always have a dead area where you have the turnaround area before you get to your boat park. There's always a dead area. So it just makes logical sense that you've got a room at that location to put your restroom facility.
Any other questions by council? Do you want to give them some direction? Mr. Templeton, you have anything to add?
That's so, Mr. Chairman.
You looking for direction from us? Can somebody give me a motion as to which plan you would like for them to use to move forward?
I make a motion that we go with the first one, concept layout number 1 with the maximum amount of parking with the restroom down there, then just a shelter area, as you noted a while ago, would be my recommendation, Mr. Chair.
Do I have a second to that motion? I have a second to that motion. Any further discussions or questions? Is everybody happy? Ready to vote? All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous, and I would hope that you would reach out, Mr. Manager, to some of the lake groups and let them have an opportunity to look at this and give some input also, all right? Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
Nice. Pursuant to section 2-2-9 of the Code of Ordinances of Greenwood County, a member of the public may speak on any listed item appearing on the agenda, with the exception of personnel matters. No speaker will be allowed to speak to multiple items. Mr. Grant Blair from Port Royal Drive has asked to speak on the lake study, so I'd recognize Mr. Blair at this time.
See if I can keep this short. I'll try to just talk about three things. That's going to be hard. On the lake study. First of all, congratulations. We've been letting Lake Greenwood grow willy-nilly on its own, and it's starting to show. And so we need this study. Now I say that because two things I want to do is just say, here are just some things you could do it better with. Okay. First of all, when we look at this, when you talk about collecting data, I want to show you something. I can bring this phone up and look from my house up to the trestle and tell you how many boats are in there right now and what to do. We've got cameras all over the lake with things that we've got. So the only thing to say is when we talk about collecting data, there are lots of ways. If you go at it, and they won't cost a lot, and you'll be overwhelmed with data. You'll have more than what you don't want to know what to do with. Trust me on that. But start looking at some other ways like that. There are a number of cameras down at the trestle. There's one camera that goes either way there. And now in the parking lots, y'all got security cameras there now, don't you? Or are you putting them up?
I don't think we want to talk about
On
security
the
cameras in a public meeting.
On the launches?
I don't think we want to talk about where our security cameras are in a public meeting.
Oh, okay. All right. You've got some cameras that collect data. Let's put it like that.
That'd be a fair statement.
All right. Then we
That's
won't talk
a
about
true statement. No more than
where they're at. You've got some cameras that could tell you what usage is in certain areas. Do you get my point?
I got the point from the beginning.
Okay. So what did I say? You can be overwhelmed with that. You've got all of that. Second thing is when you talk about how many acres or how much room a boater needs, you're not talking about usage, and this is something you're going to have to start taking a look at. My son, I went down to visit him on Lake Lanier, and he just bought a new boat. And that boat, I swear, will put your wake up this high. And that because that's the thing right now, is to have a boat with a big wake. Well, when he comes here, he's got to stay on the main lake. There's no way you can take it back in the cove. And there are more and more of these boats showing up. Same thing for tubing. That takes a lot of space. A fisherman, on the other hand, you can say he wants the whole lake because he'll stop and fish a little while and then he's gone again at 50 miles an hour is the way I like to say it. the point being is that you can't just do a straight count. And of course, my favorite thing is just get out on a pontoon. And there's only a certain area I'm gonna go to. But you get my point. So that's my 3 points.
Thank you, Mr. Blair. Mr. Phil Satterfield has asked to be able to speak against them, not against, but pertaining to the boat ramp. Welcome, Mr. Satterfield.
Phil Satterfield, I own the place next to Break on the Lake. Our question has always been, what has Davidson, Florida, what has the county done about that critical area in the back of that cove? I've not heard it addressed, period. And, we're concerned about that. So, because we didn't think the county did too good a job in our critical area on the next cove of it. Mr. Russian just said that was the busiest part of the lake. It's most narrowest, most congested, and we're talking about putting a whole lot more boats in the water right there. We have a problem with that. I understand Mr. Chappell's vision of coming across the bridge and seeing a beautiful place there, but I think he needs to go up to River Forks and look at that place. On the weekend, Saturday or Sunday, I think everybody needs to go up there and look at that. It's so crowded, it's not what we want to see when we cross the lake. And we've not done a good job with facilities at the lower end of the lake or there. I know Davidson Floyd don't do a tremendous job right there, but I'm just not sure that that's what we want to see when we're coming in Greenwood County. Have you been up to River Fork during
Yes,
were you really impressed?
there's people recreating.
But, yes.
That's what they're supposed to be doing there.
Okay, I just wasn't sure that that's what you wanted because of the trash. I heard that county has to go up there on Friday and Monday to get rid of the trash. I take the boat up there all the time, and I really don't think that's what you want at the bridge. But maybe so. But, just my 2 cents worth of it. Thank you, sir.
I really don't think we want another River Fork, I can tell you that. We've had complaints about the trash and it's not used appropriately and people really trash it out, so I agree with you. That's the last person to speak under our public comments. At this time, I would like to open our public hearings, and we have a number of public hearings. The first one being ordinance 2020-01, which authorizes the execution and delivery of amended and restated special source revenue credit agreement by and between Greenwood County and Coal Mount Greenwood SC LLC to clarify the terms of the existing agreement and extend the existing agreement up to an additional 10 years. The execution and delivery of an amended intergovernmental agreement with the city of Greenwood and other matters related thereto. This will be considered after this public hearing for third and final reading. As you saw in the Index Journal this morning, the city of Greenwood has approved the agreement. And when you talk about Coal Mount, you're talking about coals beginning with a K. And that property there, this is what this agreement pertains to. I would ask if there's anyone here who would like to speak in favor of this ordinance. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in opposition to this ordinance? If not, I will close that portion of our public hearing and ask council, what is your pleasure?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Motion by Mr. Allison,
Second.
second by Ms. Childs. Any questions or comments? Are you ready to vote? All in favor signify by raising your right hand. And Mr. Templeton votes, so that is a unanimous, and it's approved on third and final reading. Our next public hearing is ordinance 2020-16, which amends the Greenwood County zoning ordinance being ordinance 1386 if amended so that one parcel of land, 31.95 acres, owned by Jeffrey W. LeBrun and Judy L. Carter, located at 615 Old Apple Highway in Greenwood, changes the zoning classifications from R1 single family to R4 two-family residential. Before I open this up for public hearing, I'm going to ask Mr. Lindler to come forward. And what I would like is, Mr. Lindler was here last meeting and he explained to us all of the information regarding the R4 classification. I have received a call from Mr. Haney, and I think Mr. Haney may very well offer to reduce his request from R4 to R2. So before he comes and either makes that request, I would like for you to explain to council the difference between R4 and R2 to council and to the public.
First, let's start with R1, which is what it's currently zoned. It allows for single-family residential uses with a maximum density of 15,000 square foot lots. So in this case, they are currently allowed to have up to 92 single-family lots on that piece of property. The R4, which was originally requested, allows for a number of different uses: patio homes, single-family residential, duplexes, and that maximum density can range anywhere from 233 units to 351 units, depending on the type of residential use they would like to do. However, the R2 that is being talked about currently, which is very similar to the R1, except it allows for a minimum square footage of 10,000 square feet lots. So in this case, the total density for this area or this tract of land would be 139 units. So if you were to change the zoning from R1 to R2, you are increasing the number of units by 47. Yes, sir, and it only allows for single-family residential. So that's the real difference between the
R1 is
two.
15,000 and R2 is 10,000.
Correct, square feet per lot.
Before Phil sits down and we hear from, have a public hearing, is there any questions of Phil?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I could. Phil, when you give these numbers, do they take any account for as infrastructure, roads, and parking? I mean, or is it just based on acreage? In other words, is it realistic that 92 houses could be put in there? I mean, you gotta have roads, you have sidewalks and entrances, and I guess retention ponds and all this kind of stuff. So how realistic are those numbers?
Excellent question. There's always the caveat. That's the number of maximum units that we would be able to approve. However, there are constraints on any individual property, whether it be infrastructure, whether it be issues with, in this case, a power line easement that would be on the property. So there are a number of different things, wetlands, those type of issues that do arise. But from our standpoint, and what you would be approving would be the total maximum, but that doesn't guarantee that they're able to do, in this case, 92 units.
Thank you, sir. That answers my question.
Sure.
Any other questions by council?
On this property, is there appropriate infrastructure, water and sewer already existing?
Yes, sir. Very close by.
Any other questions? Thank you, Phil. At this time, I am going to ask if there is anyone who would like to speak in favor of this rezoning request, this ordinance. Mr. Bob Haney.
I didn't think you'd recognize me. Bob Haney, 304 Lodge Drive, Greenwood. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was at the public hearing, obviously, for planning and zoning, and some people spoke concern about traffic and traffic density in the area. And so I've talked to my clients, and we would never want to do anything that's not consistent with the underlying land use plan. And so they are certainly fine with an R2. if that helps to mitigate the concerns of the folks that were at the planning and zoning hearing, we're fine with that. That's more than we have now, and so, just to reiterate, we don't have any development plans. You know, that's gonna be someone that buys the site and does that, and they'll be back, you know, complying with subdivision regulations and that sort of thing later on. But we're just trying to market the property, to the best that we can for their family, and, we appreciate your consideration.
Any questions of Mr. Haney? No questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here who would like to speak in favor of this ordinance? Is there anyone here who would like to speak in opposition to this ordinance? Seeing none, then I will close that portion of our public hearing and ask council, what is your pleasure? You've heard the request of Mr. Haney that he is willing to change his request from R4 to R2. So the motion needs to be clear as to what we will be voting on.
I make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
And your motion is that the property be rezoned from R1 to R2.
I second that
I have
motion.
a motion by Mr. Moats and a second by Mr. Allison. Do you need any further questions or comments or any information? All in favor of the motion to rezone this from R1 to R2 signify by the raising of the right hand. Aye. And that is unanimous. That is second reading. And at our next meeting, we will have third and final reading. Our next public hearing is ordinance 2020-17, which amends the county zoning ordinance, being ordinance 1386, so that one parcel of land, 10.88 acres, owned by Edmund Stevens, located at 1327 Florida Avenue. The zoning is changed from I-1 light industrial to R1 single-family residential. At our last meeting, our planning director explained to us exactly what that request was. Does anyone need any additional information before I call for any comments? If not, is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of this ordinance? Is there anyone here who would like to speak in opposition to this ordinance? Then I will close the public hearing and I will ask council, what is your pleasure?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Motion by Mr. Allison, a second by Ms. Childs. Any questions, comments, additional information? If you're ready to vote, please signify by the raising of the right hand. Aye. And that is unanimous and that is approved on second reading. Our next item of business is to consider 5 boundary line agreements, which is involving property on the lake. I guess I can ask the attorney, is it appropriate to hear the explanation by Mr. Russian and to approve them as a package, or do we need to do it as each single boundary agreement?
I would approve each one,
Individually?
as he
Okay.
describes it.
Well, then the first boundary line agreement is between the county and Roxy and Kathleen Crawford. And that property is being shown and designated as Lot 3, containing 0.97 acre, located at 114 Teapot Drive in Lawrence County. Mr. Russian.
I'm going to go through the boundary line agreements real quick. We just did this a few weeks ago, but policy effective in 2013, last revised in 2014. This has to do with the 440 contour that was originally used as a boundary line. That form of surveying using the 440 contour was ineffective in establishing a true boundary between the two. And so these boundary line agreements are just that, establishing a true surveyed line between property owned by Greenwood County and an adjacent property owner. We've talked about the FERC boundary, which was established in 2002. We'll show you pictures of 2002. Back then, it was drawn very broadly, so we're going to have these big, thick lines, as we always see. We can't change the FERC boundary without FERC approval, we want to be wary of that. The other one is we're not opposing any of the BLAs tonight. All these boundary line agreements are consistent with what this council has done in the past. If they are approved, there's nothing terrible out of the ordinary. I'll point out a couple peculiar things with a couple of these, but they fall into that consistent with what you've done in the past. They either meet the policy or, again, fall. There are 6 listed here. I will say that Michael Reynolds has withdrawn his request for this boundary line agreement at this time, so we will not talk about 115 Wonderland. His attorney's here tonight. They withdrew that this afternoon after we talked a little bit more about it. So we'll just be discussing the first 4 on that list, with the first one being 114 Teapot, Miss Roxy Crawford. This is 114 Teapot. This is in red is the outline of the property. This is in Lawrence County up on the Reedy River, kind of the upper end of the Reedy River as well. There is the 2002 aerial of the site. You can see back in 2002 the water was down, large sandbar in front of the property. But even in 2002 the property looked just as it does today. Here is the FERC boundary, the large, thick orange line that goes through the center of this property was the boundary that was originally established way back when, but the dashed line that comes out here was the FERC boundary that was submitted to them, changed in 1981, redrawn in 1981, and then submitted to FERC in 2002. So that is the current FERC boundary out there. The entire property lies outside the FERC boundary. Nothing special about this one. I will say that here is the survey done by Daniel Proctor, and a previous abandoned property line right there in the middle, but this property's been in that configuration for quite some time, and again, outside the FERC boundary. Again, this is approximately a third of an acre, and is consistent with what County Council has approved in the past for boundary line agreements.
You've heard the explanation by Mr. Rushing. What is your pleasure?
Chairman, public hearings tonight, so I don't know if you want to ask for anyone who wants to speak in favor or against.
Nothing on my agenda that says anything about public hearings. I'm sorry.
It's in the public hearing section.
Okay, I thought it ended. My bad. All right, is anybody here who would like to speak in favor of this boundary line agreement? Anyone who would like to speak in opposition to this boundary line agreement? Seeing none, I will close that public hearing on that boundary line agreement and ask council now, what is your pleasure?
Move to approve, Chairman.
Motion by Mr. Lane to approve. Second by Ms. Spencer. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by the right hand. And that is passed. I'm sorry, I didn't think that was public hearing. All right, number 2 public hearing, Mr. Rushing.
Number 2 public hearing is the property of 141 Bell Reed, owned by Hugh D. Mosley Jr. In the Bell Reed subdivision, lot 30A. The property in question is about 0.08 acres by the survey. Up on the screen there you have the outline of the property in red as it currently sits today with imagery from 2016. You can see that the current property line is well back from the 440, the current 440 contour that's out there by the lake. Here is the 2002 imagery. Again, that same property was out there and seawall and all was there in 2002. Hasn't changed since that time. There's the FERC boundary. Again, outside of the FERC boundary entirely. No questions there. And then the final one is the plat outlining the 0.0 acres, which is this area right in here, is the area in question. Again, the current 440 is out here, the further on the right. Again, Lake Management Engineering Department is in favor of approving. No issues with this boundary line agreement.
This is a boundary line agreement between Greenwood County and Hugh Mosley Jr. for property located at 141 Bell Reed Drive in Bell Reed subdivision. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of this boundary line agreement? Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition to this boundary line agreement? I will close the public hearing and ask council, what is your pleasure?
Move to approve, Chair.
Motion by
Second.
Mr. Lane, second by Mr. Moats. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by the right hand. Mr. Templeton, that is unanimous. The third is a boundary line agreement between Greenwood County and Betty Jo Scurry for property located in Newberry County, located at 1854 Scurry Island Road.
Before you stands the property in question. This is imagery from 2016. I will take note on this one. This one does have a little bit peculiar. This is what is known as Scurry Island. This property's been in this configuration for quite some time. This area back in right in here, this little cove area, a portion of that does fall below the 440. Later in the survey, you'll see that that area is outside the 440. So there is a driveway out to what would be the main island, but there is water that comes back into this area here. It does lie below the 440. But that's current day. There's 2002 imagery. Back in 2002, when the FERC boundary was set, that island was just as it is today. Buildings out there. 440 looks to be right where that 440 was measured today in current times. This is the FERC boundary that was given in 2002. And if you'll notice, the FERC boundary, even though that whole area there was above the 440, that line there is off a little bit from where it should have been in 2002. All this area right in here was above the FERC boundary, should have been included, should have been excluded from the FERC boundary, just that little cove back there as well. I put up the 1992 imagery to show as far back as 1992 that property sat as it was today. There really hasn't been any major change to it. There's no seawall around it. That property has been like that for a good time. There's the current survey with the 440 contour all the way around it. There's some minor discrepancies. Both there's a little bit in the county's favor and the majority of his property owner's favor. But you can see the dash line out there that kind of was what a previous survey was done, and the current survey around it is the solid line on the outside that shows the current 440 when the property is done. Engineering and lake management does not oppose this boundary line agreement. It's consistent with what the council's done in the past.
You've heard the explanation. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of this boundary line agreement? Anyone here who would like to speak in opposition to this boundary line agreement? I will close that public hearing and I will ask council, what is your pleasure?
Move to approve, Chair.
Motion by Mr. Lane,
Second.
second by Mr. Allison. Ready to vote? All in favor signify by the raising of the right hand. The next boundary line agreement is between Greenwood County and David and Rebecca Tuderell for the property that is lot 21 and 22. It's 0.77 acres located at 203 Kayak Point in the Newport subdivision.
I apologize. I have a different acreage on my map. I have it is 0.06 acres. We need to have that correct. Here's the property outlined in red with current imagery. This is from imagery from 2016, our latest on GIS. I will note that you can see there is a seawall out there currently, and the property line, the current property from GIS is back from that seawall. Seawall's in this location right up here, that kind of white line there. Here's the 2002 imagery. In 2002, the seawall was not there. Been installed since 2002, but you can see that the imagery from 2002 that property did go out there, and the 440 was out there near that seawall. Very little difference between where that seawall is now and where the property line was in 2002. There's the FERC boundary, overlaps the seawall in the whole area, again, drawn very broadly at the time. And then there is the area in question. The area in question, and we did, this one is just a little bit odd in that this is the Tudor property right here. It's a double lot in Newport subdivision. There's a little bit of anomaly here in that the neighbor right here has this little triangle piece that juts out in front of the Tudor property. And originally, it was discussed whether this area right here would be part of the boundary line agreement with Mr. Tudor, because his seawall comes all the way down here in front of his neighbor's property. In the end, we decided that area right there would not be included in the boundary line agreement, and the boundary line agreement would only be this area up through here, which equals 0.06 acres. So this line right down through here and then up through there would be the property line between Greenwood County and Mr. Tudor, and that area right here is the property question, 0.06 acres. Lake Management and Engineering is not opposing this boundary line agreement and recommends approval.
When was that seawall built? Do you know?
I don't have the exact date. It was after 2002 from the images, but not long after.
But it was permitted?
It was permitted, yes. The problem with the seawall is we permitted it after 2002, but we permitted it to go all the way down to that location. That was our, that was our mistake. Allow that seawall to go down in front of the neighbor's property.
Okay.
Now, that seawall is on Greenwood County property. All seawalls are built on Greenwood County property. And any boundary line we do starts on the back side of the seawall. So all seawalls are built on Greenwood County property and are permitted as an encroachment on Greenwood County property. And his property would start behind the seawall.
Is that some kind of easement along the property line there?
I want to say there's setbacks, but I'm not sure what the dotted line is. I think the dotted line is setbacks, side setbacks. Yeah, there's side setbacks. That's also utility easement down the right-hand side is labeled from the original plat. The dotted line in the front of the property at the road is a 25-foot setback. Along the side is 10-foot setback and utility easement. And then the dotted line along the lake is what he has marked as a 25-foot setback. Current setback at the lake, I think, is 40 or 45 feet.
40.
40. So that line there is not the current setback.
Who actually owns this property right here?
That's the neighbor on the bottom side. That's this property owner. And
Now, has he come to us for a boundary line agreement?
he has not.
Then how do you say he owns it? It could be county property, could it not?
By the plat that was used for him to purchase the property, it has that triangle. Again, all property lines that don't have a boundary line agreement, particularly drawn at the 440 at the time. So until you do the boundary line agreement, it's a, that boundary line there, that's what, some surveyor drew as the 440 at the time, and they might go out there tomorrow and it could be over here, it could be back here, but seawalls have been permitted on both of these, so the current 440 is right at the back side of that seawall. Seawalls are permitted to be built at the 439 elevation at the time of their construction, so the current 440 sits right there on that line where the seawall is at, right behind it.
But
Front of the wall is 439, back of the wall is 440.
you don't think this line comes straight down here like that? And this is,
The plats that were drawn at the time, the plats have that little triangle on them. I know that him and his neighbor negotiated about purchasing that triangle. They weren't able to come to an agreement on it. I don't know, Laura might have a little bit more information, but that's the area we agreed upon as being the boundary line between the two.
Sounds good. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of this boundary line agreement? Is there anyone here who would like to speak in opposition to this boundary line agreement? Hearing none, I will close the public hearing and ask council, what is your pleasure?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Allison makes a motion to approve. Ms. Spencer seconds his motion. All in favor signify by the raising of the right hand.
Aye.
So that is unanimous. And you have declared that item number 5 has been withdrawn.
That is correct. And we'll bring that back to you at a later date. We have some more thinking to do on that one.
Mr. Chair, I need to ask one. Let me ask you a question. If any boundary line, with these boundary lines agreement, is there any money exchange from the county or from the owner?
There has been some in the past, but typically no. The current, council is that no money to exchange. There's such small amounts of property that's exchanged between the two. The monetary amount that would be assigned to it just isn't there. So typically the council's been approving the boundary line agreements with no monetary value attached.
I think we changed our policy around 2013.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask a question?
Sure.
On the one we're not doing, this a question because of the comment you just made that we needed to do. Was this withdrawn by the property owner, or was it withdrawn did the county find something? Is there some issue that we need to?
The attorney's here if you want to, if the chair would want him to speak to us why it was withdrawn. It's my understanding that the property owner, we had drawn up documents for a certain boundary line agreement, and the property owner changed his mind about a portion of it. That was not reflected in the current documents that we had today presented to you in your packet. But I have not spoken directly to the property owner who was withdrawn by his attorney, who's present here today.
I will recognize Mr. Paget if he'd like to speak. Don't have to, but if you choose to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And council, I can confirm that based on conversations with the property owner, with the applicant, that the original thought changed and we had to withdraw it to make a more accurate submission.
I just knew that one had been on the docket for some time.
It
so
absolutely had. Yeah.
Just curious as to what had happened.
So what you're saying, Tripp, it'll come before us at a future date.
Yes, sir, it will.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. If I read my agenda, I wouldn't ask that question because I see the next statement there says in public hearing. I apologize to staff. My next item of business is an update from the County Treasurer's Office, Kathy Miller.
Mr. Chairman, members of council, just a brief update. We like to do this once a month for you to let you know what's going on in the Treasurer's Office, Tax Collector's Office, Delinquent Tax Collector's Office. This is for the month of June. So at the end of June, we had $1.187 million in receivables. There's a report attached. Happy to say that in the greater than 90-day category, there's only about $8,000 of that. That's only with the airport and lake or the dock fees. We do have new procedures in place now. We're reviewing these receivables every month with the respective parties so that we can drive and manage collection in a more timely fashion. So we're doing a good job, I think, with managing receivables now. The bank balance, which you also have a separate report in front of you, we have about $108 million with various institutions. General fund balance right now is preliminary, and I stress that in capital letters because certainly this is year end and we are in the midst of closing the financial year, so things could change. But I think we're looking very favorable right now with what we've done with the projections. We're looking at revenue that still hasn't been reported, and certainly we're trying to get expenses into the right fiscal year. So when we look at where we began the fiscal year at 10.148, year-to-date revenue so far at 20.4, year-to-date expenses 20.2, 10.3 estimated at this point. As I said, we still have some pretty hefty revenues to come in, so I'll look for us to have a favorable year this year. The FY21 budget, of course, you know it's been approved, so the budget, the ordinances, and the fee schedules have all been loaded to the website for the public to view. Those and all the special appropriation letters have been mailed to the recipients to let them know of the decisions. The millage, we're going to try to accelerate that and hopefully bring that in for your approval in August. We're just waiting on the cities and towns to give us what they're suggesting. Everything else with the county involved has been approved and just waiting for that piece of information so we can accelerate that and give a little more time to the auditor's office, if you will, to prepare those tax statements that go out in October. They feel like they're a little bit crunched every year if we wait until September, so we want to try to pull that in earlier. And in referring to some legal issues with why we've been delaying that, there seems to be none. It was just maybe more of a preference at that time to wait and see. But we have confirmed with the Department of Revenue there's no issue with going ahead and accelerating that approval as soon as everything is in for us to do so. They just cautioned us that we cannot send tax bills out before October. I said certainly that's what we're planning to do, just to get the millage approved before then. I'm not going to read everything for you. You can see some of the highlights. The full audit is scheduled for October the 19th for 3 weeks. We have ongoing recons for the balance sheet, just going on with the return checks. I wanted to highlight that one. So we have different balance sheet accounts for return checks. The tax collector has its own account. The lake has its own account, and the EMS and other type of return checks, magistrate, whatnot, they go into separate balance sheet accounts. I do have to report to you that we have now reviewed all of these and reconciled all of these accounts, and we now have a process in place to review them every month and manage the collections of these return checks. Because unfortunately we had many from 2016 that at this point I deem uncollectible, with being 4 years later that we've had to write off to get some of these things cleaned up. We have been meeting with some members of council already to talk about special tax districts and proposals with that going forward. We've only met with 2 of the 7 so far. So please, I think Susan is trying to be in contact with each of you so I can review, again, the status of commissioners, what their fund balances are, what they're looking for their millage or fee proposal for this next year coming up, and then also some proposals on how we want to manage those special tax districts
Can
going
I ask you
forward.
a question about that?
Yes, sir.
One of mine that you sent me a list on to check on, I can get no response from them. What is?
Welcome
what
to
can
our
we do
world.
if they just won't?
We have a very hard time as well, even as, in the treasurer's office with communication. Other than we may receive invoices in the mail to say here we're.
Suspend their activity?
We could. There's a policy that when we review with you individually, we will review that policy with you and talk about the actions that can be taken if a group is not compliant with some of the requirements that were set forth in the policy.
I begged and pleaded for them to come in and do what they're supposed to do, and they won't show up, and I don't know what else to do. And I don't know if anybody else has encountered that or not, but I have one that just absolutely will not respond.
It's very frustrating on our end as well to try to manage through some of these.
But if they don't respond, then a county staff will take action.
Mr. Chairman, there's a part of your policy envisions that if you have one, what you have to do, and it gives a pretty clear step-by-step process. It involves posting something inside the facility at a public place and giving them a time period, and that they do not respond after that, then you will suspend activity.
And then the question comes up with what do you do with the remaining fund balance that the county still is holding?
Thank you.
Deputy Treasurer's report, we're doing a lot now, working with George McKinney with the grants for the SC CARES Act and FEMA to get reimbursement for COVID expenses. And then in the tax collector's office, just to call attention to the fact that we collected $962,000 in the month of June for auto. A boat, as we mentioned earlier, is about $23,000 collected in taxes. Delinquent property, $324,000 collected in June. Now, I say that because if you flip on down to the bottom of the delinquents tax collector section, on July the 7th, we placed, and there's a typo here, it is not $895, that's what I was given earlier, but I was confirming this with Karen Davis today. We actually posted 684 signs on properties on July the 7th. These properties had a value of about $1.1 million in outstanding taxes that are due to us. So yellow signs went up on properties, so the phones started ringing off the hook and people were coming up. So as of July the 20th, we have gotten $200,000 of those taxes collected, and also an additional $28,000 in the actual cost incurred by us have been recouped. So that's in basically a 2-week time period that we have collected with aggressive work on Ms. Davis's part. So that is it for my treasurer's report today. Any questions?
How many properties were on that delinquent list, Kathy?
There were, originally there were 721 to be posted. Some people came in before then, but we actually posted 684. Actual signs went up, but it was 721 properties valued at $1.1 million.
Any other questions by council?
Quick question, Kathy, during the COVID-19, how does these numbers look as far as last year? I mean, do we see any greater?
With the delinquent tax?
Yes.
I don't know. I can find out and let you know. I think it's very typical for us to have a fair number of delinquent tax notices that go out. I will find out from Ms. Davis. She did not indicate to me that it was anything extreme or out of the ordinary. There's just a certain group of folks who do not pay, and they may come up with a check later before it goes to the tax sale in October. We have, as she calls them, a lot of folks are frequent flyers. Every year there are people who will wait and they will incur penalties before they will come pay for their, pay their taxes. They wait to get a yellow sign on their door, then they'll come and pay taxes with penalties. So there's just a group of folks in the county that do that.
Thank you.
Earlier in the COVID process, we agreed with a recommendation that came from the city who collects some revenue for us. And we agreed to suspend the collection for a certain period of time. Has that suspension now ended?
That was only my understanding was the A tax and H tax.
Yes.
It didn't really affect us per se, from a financial standpoint. So I don't remember the deadline on when it was. I want to say it was through June.
Yeah, I want to say it's through June 30th.
Through June.
I want to say the June 30th payment should have squared everything up, if I remember
I
right.
mean, I was really asking, have the people begun to pay it, or
We can find out.
it seems like we
Yeah,
need to get a report from the city on how that, because we were all concerned that they would be suspended for 90-day period, and then you had this large amount of tax that they owed, and it may be difficult for them to pay, so.
I'll find out from her.
Any other questions? Don't leave right yet. The next item is discussion regarding proposed fire fee for parcel only, no structure.
This is a presentation that I really just wanted to make you aware of some of the fees that the county currently has and some of the fees that we don't have in place that might be some opportunity and a fairness issue, quite honestly. So when we talk about this, and I've been working with Steve Holmes, our fire chief, and Derek, with EMS, the director over EMS, when we look at our current fee structure, we assess a uniform service fire fee based on the square footage of the building that's on the land. So there's, residential, I've got a whole fee schedule in front of you, we won't go through all of it, but it's pretty detailed to talk about how we go in and we say how many square feet. This is above grade only, doesn't count any basements. If I were in a home in my neighborhood with a basement, it's not counted, it's above ground only. And it doesn't include if you have any barns or detached garages on your land. What I think is of interest, and I want to bring your attention, is that there are no fees assessed if there are parcels of land that don't have structures on them. Oh, is that to say we don't ever go and put out a fire on those land parcels? No, we actually do, and we do a fair amount of that. So this came to my attention and I wanted to bring it to your attention and give you just a little bit of an overview. This is the fee structure that we currently have, again, on the current fire fee, the uniform service charge we have on our tax bills. So if you were to look, and you find my little pointer here, residential, and my house right in here, then I'm paying about $115 a year for somebody to come, and put out a fire at my home. So I'm just gonna kind of fast forward. We have the multifamily, you have other properties, all these square footages. I mean, this is a programming nightmare as far as I'm concerned, but this is how it is, and I'm not recommending a change at all. This was the fee structure you just approved for the fiscal 21 budget. And then you get into manufacturing and different sizes as well. So this is the current fee structure. Here's what you don't see in fees for. There are 8,500 different parcels in the county that don't have structures on them that are not paying any fire fees at all. Now, I've excluded the county-owned land from that. So this is about 160,000 acres of land that we're providing fire service for. This is not city, this is in the county, that we're providing fire service for, but they're not paying fees for that service. So how much activity do we have? So Steve has given me some information and collected over the last 6 years. So we have about 147 calls a year. 143 of those are more of the smaller brush fires, less than 1 acre where they would respond. But when that less than 1 acre is usually 3 trucks going out, and I've learned a little bit, when he says a truck, he means it could be a brush truck or a tanker or an engine. And he has about 2 people per truck or 6 firemen who are responding, and they're out there about 2 hours to put out that 1 acre fire, respond to that 1 acre fire. He has another 4 forest fires per year, which are greater than 5 acres. So, you have a lot more response when you're handling a bigger fire in some of these areas. He could have as many as 30 firemen. And I'm going to go ahead and carve out for you. Some of these are volunteer firemen. Yes, absolutely. That's what we're using. A lot of labor from that. And these are a little average of about 4 hours per call to go out and respond for these. Now, I do want to say to you, because this came up, I see y'all vet me, I want to say something and have people ask me a question. The SC Forestry Commission does respond with heavy equipment when they are needed. But our guys are the first ones there, and then they will say, hey, we need you. Come send out some big boys with big equipment. But our guys go first. Ladies and gentlemen, I should clarify that. So what is it costing us right now? And these are estimates. I'm just trying to put it in front of you to say that we invested in 5 brush trucks or specifically putting out these fires. There's not big room for a residential neighborhood and put out, the house fire I'm having. We bought them specifically for these type of uses. And so if I depreciate that over 20 years, you got about $40,000 a year depreciation cost, but you're talking about a cash outlay here, basically $810,000. You've got labor, just ran some numbers, per year, looking at those 143 less than 1 acre fires and the 4 forest fires, just putting some numbers together with how much it's costing. Then you got the fuel and the maintenance on the equipment for us to respond. So when you're looking at this, 40, 70, 80, $80,000+ a year that is costing us really right now to respond. So what are we thinking about? Why I'm not here today is to say, okay, well, I could throw this big old option 1 at you and say, well, let's start parsing it by size of the parcel that does not have a structure on it. Again, we're not including the city property or owned by the county. This is a lot of detail, but then what we get into, to me, is minimal. Okay, $5, $10, $15. If you keep going with this, but it was called to my attention in this case, if we went with something like this, very detailed, then you're going to wind up with some of these folks paying more for their fire fee than they actually pay based on the ag use of their land. So this is not a viable option. I'm just showing the extent of, what a model could look like. This is not at all what we're proposing. I do not want the public to get alarmed with this. What we're saying is create a simple model where simply, if you're, 0 to 5 acres, you pay $5. You pay something, put some skin in the game. And then a little bit of a model here. The 5 to 25, okay, $10. Anything 500 acres and up, then you pay maybe $50 for people to come out. So with this and the number of parcels that we have, you see the majority of it is less than 5 acres anyway. It's hard for me to read, I think it's 68% in this area. But if we do something nominal like this, we potentially are gonna recoup about $80,000 a year, which, and I did not make this happen. We came up with some simple models, put it together, and it is about then a break even of what our actual costs are. So I'm simply saying to you today as information, if we put a model in like this, that people who are having us protect their properties where they don't have a structure, that this to me seems fair and equitable for them to pay some nominal fee to help us recover our cost. Pros and cons, okay, we get to recoup our cost. Yeah, you might have some negative feedback from some of the folks that own some of these parcels of land. That's why we've capped it at that $50 max. And we even vetted the fact that you may see some decrease in donations to the volunteer fire departments. I don't think this is going to be a big deal because we're not asking for a lot of money. Somebody that has less than an acre or whatever, it's $5. It's not going to break anybody's bank, but it adds, if you combine it all together, it does make a pretty good difference for the county and what we're actually spending each year. So that's my presentation. It's really, again, just information for you to consider. Possibility of a resolution later to amend our budget that we have in place for fiscal 21 to include some fire service fees for parcels, structures is what we would call it, or non-structure parcels. NSP, I think, is the acronym our assessor gave me. But that is really my presentation for today. It's just for information. And we have, I know, Steve is here now, if you have any questions specifically to him as well.
If you have not sent out the tax notices yet and we have not approved the actual tax rates, then we haven't done that yet, set them.
The fee schedule that I showed you earlier has been approved. This would be
So it would be,
modification to that.
an ordinance to change that
Resolution.
resolution.
In your budget ordinance, you give yourself the authority to change your budget ordinance by resolution.
Is there any interest on council to ask the staff to pursue or to make a recommendation to us to do this in this year's budget, or do you want to delay it and consider it for 21's budget? Well, in the next year, 22.
It would be in fiscal 21, so it would be effective with what we're looking at with this October bill that goes out. So that would be in our fiscal 21 budget, yes.
So we would have to do something in a few meetings.
Probably either at your August 4th or your August 18th meeting.
Is there anyone interested in pursuing this?
I think it's logical. I put myself as a taxpayer in this circumstance. I have about eight and a half acres of land, and of course my house sits in a corner of that land. But if it were a simple lightning strike, at the right time of the year on my property, which is all wooded, it could be a pretty significant fire, and it could require a lot of labor to put it out. As a taxpayer, I feel it's logical and reasonable. I wouldn't be opposed to it. I appreciate you guys coming up with the idea, because it is a lot of property that protection is not being paid for. I do agree with you also that it should be a nominal fee. As you said, it's not going to break anybody's bank. $5, $10. I would be in favor of it, Chairman.
Mr. Lane, can I comment on, you said you have 8 acres in your house sitting on it.
Yes, sir.
You wouldn't pay the fee.
I wouldn't.
You would not pay the fee. If there is a structure that we charge a fee on the land already,
So I wouldn't pay for the land aside from the house, is what you're saying.
no, sir, because it's included in your lot. Now, if you had a house on a 2-acre lot and you owned an adjoining 8-acre lot that had nothing on it, that was a separate property tax number, then you would pay the fee on that 8 acres. So this is not a fee on land that we are already charging a fee on the structure.
There's a lot of people that have 10 acres and they'll cut out an acre and put their house on it, and then they'll get ag on the rest of it or whatever.
That's exactly right. And that aside, you know, if I just own the acreage, I'm thinking about the land that I own, and I'm thinking about how that land's laid out. And to my point earlier about a lightning strike, if lightning was to strike on my property as it is, depending on where it struck, you might have to come in there with a bulldozer to get to it, to put it out and keep it from, because my neighbors own hundreds of acres. I'm not that fortunate, but it could be a significant financial cost layout to respond to it. So I think it's reasonable.
Any other comments?
May I ask, do we know what other counties are doing regarding this?
Steve did a survey, if you will, and it was a lot of data, and it's like, I think with every county across the state, with everything we can look at, there's a lot of different things. Some folks are charging so much per, I think one of them all was 50 cents an acre. You know, but when you start getting into some of these large parcels, it just didn't seem feasible for us to do that, to penalize, you know, some of the larger landowners. But Steve, if you.
Councilman Mose, where we lose money on this, where most of the counties in the state charge millage for their fire protection, the vast majority of them. So there's millage paid on that land, and part of that millage goes to the fire service off the land. We're on a fee schedule, and there's about 8 counties, and I gave Kathy every one of those counties and what they're doing. All of them have came up with some type of formula to charge something on open land, but she's did about as good a job as anybody on coming up with something that I thought was reasonable, because some of them, there's no formula out there to do it. They just put whatever they want to on it. Up to one county that is $1 an acre. Now it has a cap at $1,000, but it's $1 an acre. So, okay.
And certainly, we're not trying to create a programming nightmare for our IT staff to get these on the tax bills either. Something that's simple and easy to understand for everybody.
Well, the nature of the beast is we all pay money for our services that we don't use. I've never been into jail, but a portion of the county money goes to the detention center. I pay 8 meals of tax to the Metro Sewer, and I cannot get sewer where I live. And if you want to talk about unfair, that's probably about as unfair as it gets, but that money goes to industrial development and a lot of things that benefit me other than just at my house. So, I mean, you know, people need to understand. And fire service, they're going to expect us to fight those brush fires. No doubt about it. And I don't like the idea of adding fees, but we are putting a lot of money in fire service and trying to do a lot of good things to improve our fire service. And while we don't like it, it takes money. And it's expensive. And it's part of our quality of life. Any other comments? Are we actually going to bring something back to us? Maybe decide where we can have a public hearing and let people comment on it? But let staff make a recommendation to us. Thank you, Kathy. We have an appointment, Special Tax District Commissioner, finally being Jeff Thomas. He is being reappointed. Council, what is your pleasure?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Mr. Templeton. Second by Ms. Childs. All in favor? And Mr. Thomas is appointed. We have Resolution 2020-17, which considers the inducing and identifying a proposed investment under code name of Project Clouds. Is there anything that you can say about that?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. This is it's actually 5 separate solar projects at various locations in the county. One is a $50 million, 35 megawatt project. The other 4 are $3.1 million 2 megawatt projects for a $62 million total investment. What's for you, the inducement resolution is for a 30-year fee in lieu of tax agreement, as well as an SSRC that would float to equal a fixed payment of $3,750 per megawatt. So the 2 megawatt, I can't do the math in my head, but 2 times 7, or 75 for the 2 megawatts, and then the 35 would be that times 3750.
And these projects are, have been identified to be placed on land that presently, most of this land is under agricultural assessment.
Yes, sir.
So when you're talking about just one of the projects being $50 million, the tax revenue off of that is no employees, and it doesn't tax our service system, our schools, or whatever. So what is your pleasure?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Motion by Mr. Allison, second by Ms. Spencer. Any questions or comments? These are 5 solar projects. All in favor? Signify by right hand. Ms. Childs, she did left, but we'll accept that. We have first reading and title only of ordinance 2020-18, which authorizes the execution and delivery of fee in lieu of tax agreements by and between Greenwood County and a company or companies known to the county at this time as Project Clouds with respect to certain economic development properties in the county, whereby such property will be subject to certain payments in lieu of taxes, including the provisions of certain special source credits. That is the Project Cloud that we just voted on the resolution, and that is first reading in title only. Is there anything that we have omitted? Ms. Childs, we'll start with you with district reports.
At our last meeting, I talked about the request from Slow Valley Troy, requesting us to be able to help them with their tackling fee. But I did talk with someone over at Upper Savannah, and they think they're gonna be able to help them. So I've gotten that information to them already. And to remind you all that we will continue to have our free COVID testings tomorrow at 10 a.m. We'll be down at the Police Center in Promised Land. And on July 29th, we'll be over with the free testing over at Morris Chapel Family Life Center from 10 to 4. Those who have not had your free testing done, feel free to come and have those done.
That's your report, Mr. Allison.
No report, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Spencer?
No report.
Mr. Mopes?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a comment anyway. Report. An anonymous person quoted me out of context in the paper Sunday. Some of you may have read it. I want to be clear, perfectly clear. I'm not, never have been, nor will I ever be, for breaking any laws. That should be as normal and operational as anything. My point that evening when we were debating the issue was that we not really debate the law about it, whether it's legal or illegal, but that we focus on a way to get Greenwood County citizens to try and protect each other from the COVID virus by wearing a mask. That said, I want to thank and commend the individuals and businesses who are doing so today. That is my report.
Thank you. Mr. Templeton?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say thank you to all the people who have contacted me over the last week, both positive and negative. That's what makes local government the best form of government, in my opinion. Those who agreed with me and those who disagreed were all, like I said, they were all very nice, with the exception of a couple of individuals who were just downright toxic, and that's disappointing. But on that note, I just want to say that as a council member, we expect to be questioned. And in this group, this body, I want to thank each one of you because we always do not agree, but we're never disagreeable. And I appreciate that about this group. And I want to say to Elizabeth, she got a lot of unfair criticism last week with media trying to find other lawyers to say that they didn't agree with her or whatever. And we all know that if you get one lawyer in town, they'll starve. If you get two, they'll both do quite well. But Elizabeth was simply doing her job, and that's all she was doing, and she didn't deserve what she got. And I wanted to say that publicly. And lastly, I want to say to my colleagues at the city and my colleagues at District 50, who both are catching a lot of grief right now. We all do this for the betterment of our county, and we love what we do, and we love trying to take care of our people. So keep doing the great job that you do. That answers my report.
Thank you, Mr. Lane.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to kind of piggyback on both Mr. Templeton and Mr. Mo's previous comments. I was invited by Ann Eller to go on WCRS yesterday and talk about the masking ordinance issue. And certainly, as Mr. Templeton said, I have never received so many contacts in about a 72-hour period of time. Some telling me I was a patriot, some telling me I was an idiot. Maybe they're both right. I don't know. But I think that what I've taken from this this experience is that we kind of knew this issue was coming. It didn't really catch us off guard. We had been talking about the legal ramifications of this and other portions of this issue for several weeks. And I think what I have taken away as a learning opportunity from this is that we as a body probably sometimes need to take a few minutes to talk about some of these things more among ourselves on the front end. I know we were pressed in our executive session. It was difficult to do. And we were pressed in our executive session this evening for time to get into this general session. But what I'm going to suggest to this council and what I'm going to try to personally do, I responded to Mr. Pfeiffer via email after his email to us showed up in the newspaper when he said, "What are you going to personally do?" So my response to him was that I'm going to personally communicate the need to wear a mask and follow every other healthcare precaution that we can. People have been picking at me about it, but you see my mask. Please mask. I've been wearing this all around Greenwood County everywhere I've been. I think that we as a county body can be assertive in our pushing communication of the positive things that can be done. I reached out to the protest group that was protesting against the city's ordinance on Saturday. I talked with Mr. Free, who spoke with us last week. What I said to him was, if you are sincere in your motivation for protesting, and that is that you don't oppose the masking ordinance, but you oppose the mandate, then I would ask that you tell all your people that participate to wear their masks in public, because I think it sends the right signal. And I was delighted when I got home. I was out of town for the weekend, but when I got home and saw the photograph in the Index Journal, I was delighted that there may have been a few hard heads that didn't, but for the majority of those folks, they were wearing their masks. I had telephone calls from people representing their families who said, we're not masked people per se. We really haven't been, but we listened to the conversation with County Council on Tuesday night, and we promise you we will mask. So in my mind, that was the desired outcome. I wanted to make a recommendation to the council that we might even look at the possibility of purchasing some masks. And perhaps working with the United Center, the Chamber of Commerce, the hospital. And if there are areas of the county where masks are not available, whether it be shut-ins or whether it be elderly people, if we could identify that people need masks, get them masks. But I think that this entire situation that I've lived through as a county council member here in the last week has been one of my more unpleasant services on this body, but I do think there are lessons to be learned from it, and I do believe, as I said on the radio yesterday, that despite which side of this you may fall on, everyone's heart was in the right place, and ultimately, we want what's best for Greenwood County, and we want people to enjoy good health, and we don't want people to die from this mask. And I'll tell you the last thing that, last week when I was speaking on this issue, I said that I knew 14 people who had tested positive for the virus. I had one friend who had died. I had to close down my small business in Horry County because 3 of my 6 employees tested positive for COVID. And I think I made the statement that I had a family member that I thought would probably die. And my Aunt Margie died at 2 o'clock this morning. 2 o'clock this morning, she died. So I'm fully aware of how serious this is. And I hope that we can all pull together to do everything we can do. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I don't have a report, but I want to say to those who are here and to the media coverage that tonight in executive session, we had the Greenwood County Fire Advisory Committee to come before us. And they have a recommendation that they want to make in a formal meeting dealing with the possibility of a countywide ISO rating. And we have scheduled a public hearing to be held on August the 18th so that they will come back, and what they shared with us in executive session will be shared in open session. And then council will either take action or choose to do something else. But I wanted to make sure that that word gets out and that anyone who is interested in this can be present on the 18th and speak about that matter. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For my report tonight, I'd like to recognize George McKinney to speak briefly to council about the CARES Act and how it may affect Greenwood County.
Good evening. I see y'all safe to the best for last.
Before you speak, as Mr. Wayne said about the county attorney and everybody else, this county is blessed with good employees. We may not always agree, but we've got one thing that we can agree on is the good, hardworking county employees. And I don't want to say that you're better than anybody else, but I want to say this to you. I have recognized as someone just sitting by and reading and watching and hearing what you have done to deal with this COVID, and you are to be commended.
Appreciate that.
And I know so many others in the county have done just as much, but you've been on the front line, and we are blessed to have employees such as you and all of the others. And on behalf of council, I say thank you for the good job done. I know it's got to be difficult, because every time I talk to somebody, they say, I've either talked to George McKinney, or I've met with George McKinney, or George McKinney said this. So it's got to be a lot of pressure out there. And thank you very much. Now you can.
Did y'all get a copy of this, or I'll provide that to them? Yeah. It's just notes for you to take back. I'll be brief here. What I wanted to do was to kind of give you a background on the CARES Act, what South Carolina has for the CARES Act so far, and where we're at. We're still in the very beginning phases at the local level for this, so there's still some unanswered questions. And if I can't answer them tonight, hopefully I'll be able to answer them in the near future. Hopefully, as y'all know, the state received $1.996 billion back, I think it was back in May, it came down. Of that, $91 million was earmarked for Greenville County specifically because they have over 500,000 population. That money came out of that $1.996 billion. And the county government at that level, at Greenville County government, will manage that money and will distribute it and will report back to the federal agency, the Treasury, on that. That left about $1.9 billion that the legislature had for the remainder of the state. That includes state agencies, hospitals, school systems, local and city, municipal governments, as well as the special purpose districts across the board. All this funding must be spent by the 31st of December this year. Right now, what they are looking at, the state legislature, the initial breakout, and this was done, I think, back in June, late June, it was signed. That is one, I'll let you look at that there, I won't belabor that, but that was about $1.236 billion of the total $1.9 billion that has been distributed. I have highlighted there for you the Department of Administration, state and local government expenditures. That is where we will be focused at. That's $270 million that has been pushed forward. And like I say, this is the first breakout of this, and all of this money is up front for the expenditure by the 15th of August of this year. The state legislature broke this out into 2 increments or 2 phases. The first phase, like I said, is the grants that we have now that you see before you and how they broke that out. The other $668 million will not be broken out until they meet in September, and we'll discuss how that money will be separated out to be spent before the end of December. Let me look at this. They have provided guidance also for us on that. And if you look at the expenditures on the second document that I provided for you here, it kind of goes down and lists the different areas, the categories, and the different activities that we are looking at. I've kind of highlighted for me what we see here in working with Kathy and the other individuals at the city level and municipal level, where we see that the funding may be most beneficial for us or might be able to receive some of that funding back. And that's going to be under the medical expenses, the emergency medical responses. That's one of the areas that we'll be able to. And that's the fourth one down in that first section. Under public health expenses, the disinfection of public areas, that's one of the things that we'll be able to pull some funding back from. Also, the public safety measures that we've done, and this is kind of the response side of it up front, that will be another one that we'll be able to do. Payroll expenses, we will be able to do that as well. Then under compliance expenses, telework capability improvements, we have done a few things in that area that we'll be able to push forward. And in providing paid sick and medical leave, we'll have some of that in that area too. And then finally, maintaining prisons and jails. And I'm going to touch on a little other, and then on the very back, well, the next back page, the back side of that page, the only other area that we will have any area will be under the COVID related expenses, which is anything else that we may see, and we're still working at. So kind of let me talk through that a little bit real quick. Working with Kathy, we have another grant that we have, which is public assistance that will be coming from FEMA. What we're focusing on there's 2 phases. One is the response phase, and that was where we first worked up to getting ready for this and doing the responses and stuff of that nature. Then we kind of began, right now, a reopening phase back at the middle of June, maybe the end of May, starting to reopen and bring people back in to do things. So what they have recommended at the state level, especially as we're looking at these 2 different grants, because we can't request the same money twice, we can only do it once. We're looking at focusing our response costs with the FEMA grant, and then looking at the CARES Act to do the reopening side of that. And that's something we're talking to at both all of the different municipalities and other financial agencies here in the county are looking at doing that. And the reason for that is FEMA may not pay for some of those reopening costs. However, we are still open for response. They are still kind of wishy-washy. So one of the things that we're looking at on that is going ahead and saying, any reopening, that way we don't take the chance of pushing it to FEMA and then them coming back and saying, no, we're not going to do it, and we miss out on the August 15th request time frame on that. So we are, as we're doing this, the South Carolina Department of Administration is using a grant program that they have been, they have, what's the word I'm looking for here, have contracted out for, and they're using that, and we're working on that. And part of that process that we have to do, and I think the county manager and you, Chairman Brown, have received an email to sign a signatory agreement. Once that happens, then that will give me the capability to go in and we can start uploading and asking for these returns in the very near future. Specifically, as soon as that's done, we can do that starting this week. But we are working with Kathy and with Julie Latham in the Treasurer's Office to make sure we get those dollars broken out specifically before we go forward with either one of them. Okay. And
I would just tell you that that's an electronic signature, and I have given permission for that to be signed, and I'm sure so.
Okay.
So it should be ready to go tomorrow.
Okay, so I should be getting an email back for me to be able to get in there. Okay. That's kind of what I have for y'all today, this evening. As far as the reimbursement, we're still learning. I got a 40-minute class on how to use the program last week. They've got another training that will be tomorrow afternoon that I will be going through on the program as well, and we will get a little bit more specific. The other one was more about the program. This one will be a little bit more about the different projects that we can request refunds on. And so that's kind of where we're at with that right now.
Do you anticipate the state folks just reimbursing us for actual expense that we could document, and there would be no other seed money or no other allocation beyond that? I mean,
right now, I don't see that under this initial side. It's going to be what have we spent, what we put in. It will be 100% back from the CARES Act. Through the FEMA side, it will probably be 75%. The question is where that 25 match comes. State EMD is working with that right now with FEMA and also with the legislature to see if the state will absorb that 25% also. So that's the side that we're looking at right now. That hasn't been determined yet. So I don't know what the second phase is going to bring. The legislature, when they meet in September, will kind of determine how we go forward with that next pot of money. And right now we're looking at, and I think speaking with Kathy this week, we're about 52,000 the last time I saw of what we need to request between both FEMA and the CARES Act right now. And I think the city's at about 30,000.
Mr. Lane mentioned buying masks for the public on this program. Is it possible for us to buy anything like that and then ask for reimbursement through this?
There is a potential for that. I don't know what they're going to say on the second side, though. That's going to be the question on where they're at. If it is a focus for COVID, I'm pretty sure they are fairly lenient in the CARES Act, a lot more so than in the FEMA. FEMA is very strict on what they will pay, and so that's the reason we're focusing really just those areas there to get that done there. So the potential is there for us to do that. There's other potentials that are out there also. I do believe that will come up will be for small business loans or small business grants, I guess would be the better way to say that, as a potential out there. I know that has been discussed at multiple locations. And I know Lawrence right now is doing that. Now, they're not going to be able to get it back in this first iteration, but they're looking at the potential on the second iteration.
Well, that's another question about small business loans. I've had a conversation with the interim chamber exec, and he's very interested in researching if any of this money potentially could be used for small business grants. And,
I've been working with the city, with Laura as well, and been working with Ben Calhoun and talking through that from the small business side of the house. And right now, what we've seen is just recently have we seen businesses really coming out. We've done a survey. Laura and them are going to be redoing another survey over the next week or so to kind of start seeing where these small businesses are. I know we've had 3 that have approached her now looking for not loans, but grants.
And do you know of any county governments, county councils such as we, who have appropriated any seed money for small business grants?
The County of Lawrence has done this. They put out $50,000 right now. I don't know. I've got Ben Calhoun and Laura checking on this now for us to see what that is specific. I haven't gotten any information back on that. I know the city of Greenville is allowing, under their $91 million, small businesses to, what's the word I want to look for, apply for grants in that, and they're looking at. But that, once again, is Greenville, not city, but county of Greenville has that capability to manage that money in that side. That's another reason I foresee this being available at the state level from the legislature, pushing that back down to do that as well.
Have you heard that Abbeville is doing that?
I don't know if Abbeville, I haven't heard there. I just know Lawrence is the one I've heard, and Greenville now. I think Florence, the city of Florence, I think has also done it at the city level.
George, let me ask you a quick question. It struck me this weekend when I was thinking about just all of this and the events of the last week. Does your office have the ability to do what I call robocall?
We can do a code red call back out to individuals through that. So in a sense, yes, we do. But we are limited on the number of minutes that we have to be able to do that.
What do you mean when you say number of minutes?
We have we have about 75,000 minutes that are pushed out to us annually to be able to do those calls throughout the year. And we pay for that. That is the upfront side. We can go back and buy more. I'd have to go back and check and see how much that is. I
Do we
haven't checked.
typically consume all those minutes every year?
We do not.
The reason I'm asking that question is, one of the things that struck me was, we've all, since COVID's been going on, Dr. Fauci's on national television and you see, if you see that, then the governor has press conferences and everybody talks about precautions. But it got me to thinking that until the mandatory mask ordinance issue came up, you really didn't hear much at home here in our community about pushing the message. And so in trying to do what could be done to do that, I wondered if you had that capability, just a brief message, about the precautions.
We can do that. Right now, we're running at about 60% individuals in the county that are signed up for that vote. And that's about 60% of the 70,000 people that are in the county. There's not 100%.
Almost 40,000.
Mm-hmm. And we can also do it other ways through there too, email, text, as well as doing it. There's an app that goes out there, and I'll tell you, it's very, that app really worked. Tell you up front that it's helped in lots of cases with some law enforcement cases that have done too. So I'm not saying it can't be done. We just look at it and see how much and what we want to do.
Code red out.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'd like to talk to you about that.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I think under the public health expenses, it clearly will allow us to use money to provide masks.
And I would caution here, these are the guidelines for the first 1.2 billion. We don't know what those guidelines will be for that second area yet. So I say that just to make sure.
Ours is not in the first.
This is before any money's expended before 1 July is where this is going to be coming from.
Yeah.
So anything that we spend now, we'll have to look and see what the legislature allows within that eligibility.
And that's been some of my concern with the mask issue is the availability to mask people to have access and to get a mask. And I know for most of us in this room that don't sound logical. But the radio station that Theo is on, I don't know if you listen to that radio station, they are trying to gather peanut butter for the Salvation Army. Because peanut butter is high in protein and a cheap way to feed people. And they have got a dire need for peanut butter. I mean, they're on it every day. And they're going through peanut butter in this county by the gallons for people to eat. And my question in this whole ordeal has been, if you can't afford peanut butter to eat, can you afford a mask? Can you afford to buy?
I noticed yesterday when I was in Walmart had a staff member outside and they had a table set up and they had masks there and you did not have one. They got a requirement you have to wear a mask, but if a person did not have one, they offered them one free.
So maybe there's places that they are available, but I do question, and I think making sure that Lowe's is doing the same thing. You will not go in Lowe's. Now, for months as this was going on, you could go in Lowe's with 1,000 people, but Lowe's has put somebody at the door and the same thing. But I think we need to make sure that people do have the availability
And if I may, one of the things that we're working with the city and the chamber, as well as the Uptown Greenwood side, is to do a pledge, if you will, with businesses and stuff across the county, not just keeping it in the Uptown region. And I just started this today. And one of the things that we're doing is partner with those businesses to help provide those masks and stuff as they go out too. And some of those are coming forward with that and doing it. And I think Lowe's is one of those that has agreed to help with that process. So that's some of the things that we're working on as well to try to get that message out about wearing masks.
Seems like to me, we at the county could participate. We don't have to recreate something. We can partner with somebody who's already doing it, but just buy some masks and give it to someone who's struggling to buy it, but they have a program to distribute the mask.
That's true.
That seems like, to me, that's the way we ought to go, instead of putting another burden on our staff or you to develop a program to get it out. Find someone in the community that's doing a good job, but just go to them and say, we're willing to buy these masks and give them to you and let you distribute them, whether it's United Way or whomever. I don't know who's out there.
But to let you know too, in that realm, and I'm belaboring this and I apologize, but the United Way, and you probably saw this in there, they have already gotten CARES Act money here, and they've spent about $60,000, not all of it on masks, but they have masks that are out there also, and they're giving those out. In fact, they're doing it at a couple of the, one of the free checkpoints or free test sites that is going on. They will be providing those masks also in those areas, and they are focusing in those areas to do that too.
But I think it's critical if we can, I believe Miss Susan told me that the delegation has a meeting scheduled
Monday the 27th at noon.
Monday the 27th at noon. Do we need to meet with them and talk to them about what our needs are here? Because they will be going back in September and voting on what you have talked to us tonight about.
It can't hurt to speak to them and let them know what we're thinking.
Mr. Manager, what do you think? Do we need to get George and you or whomever to represent us at that delegation meeting and just say, you know, y'all need to go down there and fight so that we can have some flexibility with this money. Small business people, Lara told me over the weekend that I think she lost 3 small businesses last week.
Yes.
And she says that there are 3 or 4 others that are teetering on whether they're gonna close their doors.
Yes.
And we have one business uptown that had been here 30-something years that closed last week. So, I mean, they're struggling. They're struggling. You think we can go to the
Absolutely, I do, and I think you used the key word to me, is flexibility. You know, I think that's what we need. We don't need the big counties and big cities sucking all the money up, and we also don't need something that comes down that's so onerous that it's not effective to us. I think flexibility is the key, and I think that's the message we should deliver to them on Monday.
Any questions, comments from Mr. McKinney?
I would just simply reiterate that if we can find money somewhere from the feds to help our small businesses, I would vote for it tomorrow. We need to do that. That's the backbone of our economy. Small businesses can't go under. And any way we can help them, we've got to do it. So whatever you can marshal together for that purpose, I would be 100% behind.
Is there anyone on council who is opposed to ask the county manager and working with George and the county attorney and whom else in the county staff that needs to be involved to look at what the others doing with this seed money and then come back to us and talk to us about it at our next meeting? And I don't know if we can do it or not, but at least we need to consider appropriating an amount of money and then maybe allowing another agency like the chamber or whatever to set up the grant process.
That's good.
I mean, we don't have to do it, but at least we can hear from our people that are dealing with it every day. And I don't know if you have some other people out there that knows more about small business, but you're in touch with them continuously.
Yes.
So why don't we do that? We do appreciate it.
Thank you.
And if you need us, in any way, and I would hope that you and Toby would work on this presentation to the delegation, and some of us will be there to support you.
Mr. Chairman, I just need to, say thank you to George for all that he's doing, because he's at every site that we've done the free COVID testing, working with, the National Guard, work with the police, whoever's there, he's been there leading and guiding them, we thank him for that. Also, here in this community.
When we all went to Hodges to be tested, that time, I noticed, it was hot as blue blazes then, and it's even hotter now. I noticed all those military people up there, and I just thought they were there at Hodges. Then the other day, I happened to go to my family doctor, and it was near the hospital. I noticed the military down there, and just seemed like so many people are just giving and doing, and when everybody's coming together to try to do the best they can do.
They have been here and they're looking to hopefully be able to go on at least through the end of September supporting this as well too. So, and there's lots of other people that are doing it as well, so. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Manager, you have anything else?
Nothing else, Mr. Chairman?
Is there anything we have failed to take care of? There being no other business, then this meeting is adjourned. Probably one of the longest legislative meetings we've had.